All right. Call to order this meeting of the Judiciary Personnel and Licensing Committee at 6:03 p.m. Present are Trustee Ursink and Trustee Baldoff. Trustee Lynn will be a little bit late today. And on the agenda, we have 4 items to discuss. So first, we have to consider appointments to the Board of Appeals. And I think we have Assistant Manager Anderson to present on that.
That's right. Good evening, everybody. I apologize if I have a little bit of some echoing going on. I don't have any carpet tiles in here. The item that we have for your consideration is to fill the 2 alternative roles on the Board of Appeals. This item was previously on a full village board agenda by error. When we looked a little bit closer at policy 30, and again, my mea culpa there, it was understood that the process is for JP&L to do review of applicants through a potential interview process. So knowing that we now have 3 interested applicants for the Board of Appeals, it would be up to the committee to determine which 2 they'd like to recommend for the full board to consider.
Great, thank you. And I just have one question as a point of clarification here. And these are 2 vacancies we're filling, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Due to recent movement, we did move an alternative person into a permanent role.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll open it up for any discussion. Trustee Ursink, and we also have Trustee Stokerbrand here if she has any thoughts as well.
Thank you, Trustee Baldoff. I guess just for more clarification, these are for alternate positions, or are these for the actual Board of Appeals positions on the Board of Appeals?
The alternate positions.
Alternate.
But again,
what are the responsibilities of alternates? And, could you just in this?
Right. It really comes down to, and please, Manager Ewald or Clerk Harrell, please step in if you like. But my understanding of the Board of Appeals is in the event that a quorum is unable to be made with the permanent membership, the alternative members really come in handy to make sure that a meeting can make and happen.
And does anything prevent these members from serving on other boards throughout the village? Like if they were interested in serving on another, like another board, Board of Review, for instance, would they be able to serve on both boards? Because I think the Board of Appeals only meets occasionally, correct?
That's correct. Manager Ewald, is there any clarity that I could lean on you for?
I don't believe there's any prohibition towards that. It's purely up to the appointment preference of the village board.
Great, thank you. Just my comments for these candidates. I've only heard from one of the candidates in person, and that's Cole Heinrich. And Cole has been a longtime resident of Shorewood, 10 years. He's the loan officer here with working with different mortgages and real estate agents. And he is just he's a fantastic community member. He's a musician as well. He's played a lot of music at the farmers market. And he's just a ball of energy and enthusiasm. And I think, without meeting the other candidates, they might be equally as enthusiastic. But for somebody like this to be applying for a position here, volunteer position, is kind of exactly the type of people that I would love to see more of apply for these positions. So I think, looking through these applications, my recommendation would be Cole Heinrich and then Allison Carver.
Thank you, Trustee Ursink. I share your sentiment about Cole Heinrich. He reached out to me and shared a bit about why he was interested in serving, which I very much appreciated. And it seems like he's got some pretty deep connections in the community, and has been very engaged in different aspects of serving the community. So I would definitely be very, very comfortable advancing that appointment along with Allison Carver. But Trustee Stokbrand, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have any thoughts, we'd be happy to hear them. Okay, and do we have any members of the public who wanted to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none. I will also say that we did receive an email from Trustee Lynn saying that he, was supportive of all three applicants generally. So I think that we can go ahead and make a motion on this.
Sure. If you'd like, I move to recommend Cole Heinrich and Allison Carver to the Board of Appeals for approval by the full village board.
Second. All those in favor? Or wait,
One point of clarification. So in the memo, it talks about interviewing them.
I
And
don't
the-
necessarily think that I saw that and I just didn't think it was necessary. So I didn't make that
Okay,
recommendation. Well, I saw in the motion that you would, there's two suggested motions here.
sure.
One is to interview the candidates and one is to proceed
Okay,
with the
so
candidates.
in making that motion, you're suggesting that no interviews occur. Okay, just want to be clear.
I think the applications speak for themselves, and speaking with at least one of the candidates, I feel comfortable enough
Okay.
personally to recommend him. So if the full board wants to interview these candidates further. But
Yeah.
I will move, forward with recommending these two.
yep, my second remains. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries to 2-0 and 1 absence. All right, our second agenda item this evening is, if I can get to it here, is to consider a premise amendment to Metro Market number 9893 liquor license. And this is Manager Ewald.
So the Metro Market currently has they have a few parking stalls located in the parking structure on the west side. If any of you have done order your groceries online and then pick up, so they're looking to add additional stalls there for a total of 5. And I believe that Taylor Nelson may be from Metro.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Taylor Nelson. I work at Roundy's in the facility engineering. And they have 2 spots right now, and we're looking to add 3 more for a total of 5. I guess give you a little background real quick. This pickup department was built in 2019. It's not too long ago. It was designed to do about $550,000 in sales per year. And as of this year, we're actually at 1.5 million. So kind of a big jump in the last couple of years. And our wait time is decreasing because people are there's only 2 spots. There's basically 3 to 4 people at a time trying to park. So it's not that safe in the parking garage. So we're looking to park as many people as we can when they want to buy the groceries.
So the amendment is a simple modification to the identification of 5 stalls.
Okay, so just 5 instead of 2, and they'd be 5 all next to each other.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Did you have any questions? Trustee Lindsay?
And this would be on the first floor?
Correct.
First floor, and the proper signage for these stalls would be in place?
I'm presuming, Mr. Nelson, that you would have the identical signage that you have for the first 2 stalls, which identifies the stall number and then the phone number of which to call when you're there.
Correct. We'd have the signs, then we would probably restripe as well. So
Okay.
there would be enough signage for sure.
And do you worry about these extra parking spots taken away from current parking spots? Because I know it gets pretty busy down there, and I know that people are already having a hard time parking on that first floor. Is that a concern at all?
I did speak with my team. They weren't totally concerned about that. We do have the 4th floor for parking, mostly for associates, but it really doesn't fill up too much. So I think there is enough parking, and more people are starting to use the e-commerce side of our business. So they thought it was a good idea.
And can you talk about any updates with security guards in the parking lot? I know it's something that we've talked about recently of maybe bolstering a little bit more security. And I feel like if you guys are doing more business in the parking lots, are you guys feel comfortable with the type of security you have in place for that?
I guess that's not really my field of judgment here, but I can bring that up to my associates and attend another meeting to discuss that. I know we have added more security inside the building for sure, especially at night when some of these activities are occurring. So it's definitely something I'm going to bring up for maybe getting someone in the parking lot, at least walking around a little bit. I know we have guards at the front door sometimes, so that should help.
Well, and I guess kind of to that point, one question, if you are able to answer it, or if not, get back to us with an answer, please. What are the hours for grocery pickup? Is it, the entire time the store is open? Is it more limited? And, the other question I have is, just with, 5 spots there and, people trying to get in, not wanting it to back up too much, like what's the average, time somebody's waiting in one of those spots to get their groceries? And I'm asking these questions being inclined to support this. I'm just curious because, I think anecdotally, we've all heard people talk quite a bit about the parking situation and, just want to make sure, we're being mindful of, that being not further congested.
Yeah, definitely. So I know the average for all of our stores in Wisconsin, and we have 100 stores, is about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Right now with the 2 spots we have at Shorewood, it's about 5 minutes. So we're hoping to cut that down a little bit, at least by a minute. So it'd be about 4 minutes in each spot if all 5 are filled up at a time, which, like I said, it's usually 2 to 3 at once. So not a long time, but they're definitely sitting for a few minutes. So I do understand that.
I guess my last question is, so folks can purchase liquor through this process and get liquor delivered to their car. What's the, how do you guys check for ID? How do you know that it's not potentially underage children buying this alcohol? And, what's the process look like for that?
Yeah, so I believe when the customer pulls up, one of our associates that's obviously over 18, usually a CSR that's working up front, will go check the ID, make sure it's all good. Then they'll go back in and bring the groceries out. So they'll actually check the ID before they bring anything out, to make sure. And I'm not sure if this is an issue. It's something I could look into as well. How many times people are trying to use fake IDs or what have you. But we definitely check the IDs and then bring them out safely.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Anybody else be heard on this item? Okay. Seeing no one else, ready for a motion.
I'll take an attempt
right.
here. So I move to approve the amended premise description to the Metro Market number 6893 license to include 5 parking stalls utilized for grocery pickups located in the southwestern corner of the connected first floor parking structure.
I will second that. However, I want to just make one note of clarification here. The motion says store number 6893. The agenda item says 9893. So just want to confirm which one is correct.
It'd be 6893.
Okay, great. So then the motion is correct. So that's just fine. So I will second that motion. And all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Moving on to our third item, which is the review of proposed 2023 Human Resources Manual amendments by Assistant Manager Anderson.
Hello again. I know it's a fairly large document, so I hope the summary was helpful for you to identify which changes are being proposed. Just so you're aware, JP&L committee, this is the first time this is being seen by a body, a government body. This will also go to the library board for consideration on December 14th, and it's slated to go to the full village board on December 19th. So assuming there are no other major changes needed, in which case I could still hustle to get them made. But just to go over things as a summary, throughout the document, I just looked for ways that we could be consistent with the numbering conventions so that when we as village staff are citing specific areas for the full village staff or community, if they need information, we can really identify those areas quickly. So making sure that the outline convention was consistent throughout. Also just finding various grammatical or misspellings as needed. I corrected those. Some of the larger items that we did address in this year's changes was we included that in the resignation section that vacation leave would not be eligible to be used to extend employment. The reason being that this creates a little bit of an administrative burden for the finance team as well as the administrative and payroll specialist, just because there's more to it than just using vacation to get that last date pushed out. There are other stipulations with what the village is paying for life insurance, other insurance coverages, and just making sure that if we have that defined date, that the last date on the job will be the last day worked. It will just help alleviate some of that administrative burden. Another item that we looked at was cleaning up some language on the way comp time is accrued. There was a little bit of a misnomer or just misunderstanding about how comp time was accumulated because we were running into accrue and use to get back down to the 40 hours rather than once you hit that cap, you're pretty much finished. So just including language to make sure that that's helpful for the village team, for those that are eligible for earning compensatory time. Another item that I included was establishing a procedure that retirees paying premiums on time so that they don't get in default. It would just make sure that we have that language in the manual stating that what those expectations are. So if somebody gets behind, we contact them, but if they are more than 30 days past due, or that we're making sure that they understand that they could face, being in default and having their insurance canceled. So again, that creates a little bit of an ease on the finance team so that we're not having to chase down folks, since the way that it's billed to folks that pay the insurance premiums to the village, we try to do it 2 months in advance, really, because the village pays the month beforehand. But again, just making sure that we have that in place would be helpful for the finance team. Lastly, the other the other change that I made was for separation pay, just defining when vacation is paid out, defining that sick leave is not paid out at separation unless defined by a retirement. And then lastly, that vacation pay is not paid out for terminations from misconduct. I hope I made that as lively as possible. That's just a high level of the changes made to the HR manual for 2023 year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do have one question for you. So in the section where there was the clarification about vacation not being able to use to extend employment under resignations, there was a change. So in that second paragraph, it says an employee who resigns and gives 14 calendar days prior notice will be paid, and it changed from his or her to their. And I'm just wondering, because I looked and there are like 12 other instances where his or her is used. Is it, could we change that to their throughout and use it as an opportunity to be more inclusive for people who, for whom his or her don't apply?
Sure. Thank you for the catch. As I was making changes, I tried to find them all, but again, I didn't do a search and replace. So yeah,
it's a lot of document to review. So I certainly don't fault you for not catching every single possibility. But it just seemed to me like a very hopefully simple update that, might be important to some
Yep.
of our employees.
Great, great
Okay.
catch. And I agree. And the goal in doing this was to find, as inclusive language as possible. So yeah, I can definitely make that change.
Great, thank you. Trustee Ursink, anything? And Trustee Lynn, anything here? We are on item 3, reviewing the HR manual changes. So if you want to take a moment to get caught up, we will come to you if and when you are ready here.
I don't have much to add to this, except for, I appreciate your time and energy going through this and being open and receptive to the changes that Trustee Baldoff has outlined. So thank you.
I did not.
Great. All right, and do we have anyone else here who wishes to be heard on this item? Trustee Stokbrand?
This is sort of just I can't find it now, but there was a sustainability policy, I believe, when I was reading through this. And it's just an update on a situation locally. It had that if if you get new furniture, you're supposed to find someone else who could use your old furniture perhaps, or have Public Works take it to Goodwill, and none of the Goodwills will take furniture anymore. So might as well remove that. And I had it with 99 on the packet, but I can't find it in the.
Maybe we could just clarify by maybe it's not Goodwill, but maybe there's like restock. There's other organizations that could potentially take furniture. We could just research that
There it is.
or put something more generic in there about that instead of Goodwill.
Thank you. I didn't catch that in the HR manual, but I will look for it and then investigate.
Page 8399.
Oh, great. Page 99.
That's 99 of the agenda and 83 of the human resource manual.
Great. Thank you. Oh, it's an appendix. Got it. So thank you for that catch. I really did focus on the body of the HR manual and really tried to get to the appendices. Other than updating the table of contents of the appendices by changing some of the letters, I didn't get into the thick of a lot of them. So I can look at that for sure.
Thank you. All right. Well, then I think we are ready for a motion on this item. Anyone's ready to make one? If not, I can get to it. I'm just scrolling back.
Page 16.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. I move to approve the 2023 Human Resources Manual with the changes that were discussed at the committee meeting this evening.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. And last item we have on the agenda this evening is to review current laws governing ethics for elected officials, and that is from Manager Ewald.
Within your packet was a memorandum that identified a link to an article recently posted by the League, which reviewed the laws that govern public officials and ethical matters. This was brought up during the course of our discussion on ethics that occurred at the last JP&L meeting. And this body requested that the article be distributed and that Attorney Bayer be present to review the document with JP&L and answer any additional questions.
I think,
I'll open it up.
Yeah, based on our last conversation, I think, we had a really robust conversation about what can actually be done in certain situations with trustees that, maybe, have kind of maybe gone out of line or have acted inappropriately or, maybe struggling with certain mental or health or, issues or drug abuse or alcoholism, those types of issues. what can be done legally? Because I think the idea was we started discussing a code of ethics, or, maybe even a ethics board that can review these issues. But I think in past situations here, I think the conversation was you can, censure a potentially a trustee or recall. So there was two sort of avenues that can be taken. And I think, we left off on our last conversation of wondering, what can we as a board actually do if we were going to create any sort of guidelines for our village board.
Trustee Lynn, did you have anything here?
So. Wow. Alderperson Brookfield used by fourth. And I found out that my. But I didn't read, but didn't read the article, but my thought was that would like fall under, this ethics code here, like number one, using their office to obtain financial. Forward. I think most of these that are in there now are related money based and not committing normal crimes. But like on the side of, what if somebody does something that, we just think is wrong, that we don't like, that, inappropriate, mean to another fee or something of that nature? Is there any reason we can't just vote to like put it on the next agenda and vote to for that person? And if we do, what does that mean?
Basically a public. Yeah, you can. You can do that. Really, when. Oh.
Just do you want to talk in the microphone?
I'm sorry. My apologies. Oh, here we go. I was.
Real close, like you're like,
There
getting
we go.
there, moving real
Exactly.
close. There we go.
So I think the answer to the question was, yes, you can do that. And I don't think, I think you have the inherent authority to do that under the applicable code provisions and Robert's rules and all those kind of things. Where you run into sort of gray areas and questions is, to really take action against somebody, you're looking at 1959, which is the Code of Ethics for Local Government Officials. And that's mostly, that's mostly financial conflicts of interest that are covered. And that's mostly what's in the league opinion. And then you've got Chapter 17, which governs 1713 governs removal of village elected officials. And it says, you can vote collectively, vote to remove somebody for physical inability to perform the duties, or for cause, which requires a due process hearing. And so there's a lot of process that applies to someone that's elected as opposed to someone that's actually hired as an employee. And there are certainly, first of all, no doubt, many municipalities have these, and you can. They're largely, these codes of conduct, they're largely symbolic or aspirational, if you will, because when you run it, when the rubber hits the road, and you have an issue like you had in Milwaukee, where there was an investigation conducted by the HR associated with allegations that the city attorney there had committed some acts that were inappropriate with other employees. The conclusion there was, well, the HR manual isn't going to apply to an elected official, and the only way to get rid of them is either under Chapter 17 or recall them under Chapter 9, or if they did something criminal, they might get arrested, and that might disqualify them. But I mean, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road, if you will, is, there's not a whole lot you can do. And the reason it's set up that way is because they want to isolate the elected process for having someone participate in an elected body. They want to make that different, not subject to the same set of rules and regulations that would apply to an employee, because otherwise, you could theoretically manipulate the process. And the idea is that, elected individuals respond to and are the responsibility or their responsibility is owed to the electorate. And if the electorate thinks that they did something inappropriate or, against the code that, of ethics that would be applicable, they can be recalled or they can be removed for cause under Chapter 17. And that's largely it.
One point of or question I have, I guess, is, and this was, something that was my, kind of my position here, thinking this through, at the last meeting was, I'm certainly great with having high standards for ethical behavior. But if we were to codify something, it's also somewhat duplicative because it's already, there's already a state code of ethics for elected officials where you can't, get something, you can't derive a personal benefit from your position as an elected official. And that state law would apply here, right? So anything we did would be duplicative for the most part.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
To the certain extent that you're correct, because the state statute 1959 primarily addresses, well, actually all it addresses is economic benefits associated therewith. Usually if you look at these, they go way beyond that on the local level, and you're supposed to be, they address decorum at meetings and what you can and can't do and how you're supposed to treat each other and all those kind of things that go above and beyond. I'll just give you an example of another local community that had an issue where the allegation was somebody repeated something that had been said in a closed session. Well, again, you can't suspend them for a month for meetings. You can't kick them off committees. You can't do anything like that. And ultimately, they spent a lot of time and treasure in evaluating that and hired a third party to come in and evaluate whether or not their own internal code was violated. And it may have been, but at the end of the day, all they could do is tell them not to do it again, So that's sort of where, that's kind of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm looking at Trustee Stokebrand had shared the article about the Brookfield issue, and looking at the Brookfield Code of Ethics, which was not one that we had reviewed previously. It does seem to really look a lot like just kind of repeating what the law is at the state level. Just kind of scanning it, talking about responsibility of public office and that, you're bound to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of the state, carry out impartially the law, and, request the, unauthorized use of, government-owned property for personal convenience or profit, can't grant special consideration to anyone beyond what's available to every other citizen, no conflict of interest about, financial interest, immediate family, personal interest kind of things. So, that's just, I'm great with having high standards for ethics when it comes to things like that. But I don't want to see our village go down, fall down the rabbit hole of trying to police, the behavior of elected officials, like during meetings, or, just kind of like personality type, a code trying to regulate that kind of thing. Because if somebody is behaving really poorly, that's something I hope that the community will become aware of and they will choose to not vote that person in again. I just think it's really not where we want to head with having, a process stood up to where people are like making complaints because I didn't like the way this person said this, or I didn't like the way this person emailed me. And, ideally everyone would conduct themselves, at the, highest standards all the time. And that's certainly what, the law requires of us. But, sometimes people's emotions get the best of them or they make a bad choice or whatever. But I would just hate to see us, set up a process where, there's just the possibility of just filing complaints against one another all the time. Like, that's not what this is supposed to be. I think we don't want to discourage people from running for office, having really high standards when it comes to people not benefiting from the position, people not being able to give preference to a family member or, use village business as an opportunity to enrich themselves. Like, I am great with having very high standards with those kinds of ethical issues. And I think that the state law already lays that out really clearly. What I'm not comfortable with is going down, that rabbit hole of trying to really regulate people's personal behavior. So that's my opinion. And I am happy to hear from others though.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Trustee Baldoff. I'm not going to take up too much more time, but we're definitely on the same page with our thinking.
I agree. And I would just kind of, 2 points that kind of came into my mind is, if we know what our tools are, if our tools are censure, recall, if these are our tools that we have and those already exist, I don't see any reason why we couldn't use the HR, the code of ethics that already exists in our manual as guidelines, in here as well. If I were, if you guys wanted to censure me for some reason, I would hope you'd have some reason, and that you'd be willing, and that people would be willing to say, if you look at our HR guidelines, things like that, you broke these rules, and even though we can't fire you or whatever it is, we believe that you still should have followed these rules. So I don't see any reason why we can't use that in practice, but also just in the case of writing rules. While I'm personally happy to follow any rules that are presented to me, I have no problem with that as an individual. I look at myself as a straight white man and ask, should I be the person who's in charge of telling other people how to act? My perspective is probably very different than other people's perspective. So, is it fully appropriate, for me to make those rules and apply them to other people? Even though if I'm happy myself to follow the rules, it's a little different being on the other side of it. So it's kind of a thin line that we're walking, and I just want to be very careful with that.
Thanks
Yeah.
for that. I really appreciate you saying that, because that's definitely a concern, is that, there are more, that's a concern. So thank you. Go ahead, Trustee.
A
Armisen.
lot of those issues are subjective too. I mean, to some people it might be offensive, to others it may not be offensive. So, who's to say, if I'm out in Shorewood and I've had several beers, and I run into somebody, like, should I, I'm always conscious about that, but what if somebody takes it the wrong way? What if I said something the wrong way, and so I worry about, that taking away from my ability to be out in my community and to be talking to people. And I don't want to always be second guessing being the person I am and being social and going out and having fun in our community, just because I'm nervous about what might happen to me and the board the next day when I'm just trying to make decisions about, DPW or, things like that. So it kind of makes me nervous to go down that rabbit hole. And I think we do have these state statutes already set up, and we do have the human resource manual. So that's kind of how I feel.
Trustee Stokebrand, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
I just wanted to be clear on a couple of things. So if someone we used to have something in the code that I believe it was an affidavit process or something, and then we rescinded that. And so what we would totally rely on state statute. So let's say we had the parade situation here. I'm sorry, I didn't forward that email to you. Alderperson in another community is in a parade on the 4th of July, and person has a banner, she's a realtor, and she has a banner on the side of the car that says, "Your realtor, call 414, I'll sell your house." And so another alderperson called her out on this and reported her to the Brookfield Ethics Board. And so what would we do in Shorewood? just run through the process for me so I know what would we do here?
Well, I think I did see the headline. I didn't get a chance to dig into the whole thing, but I know exactly what you're talking about. What I don't know though is I don't know whether the complaint there was based upon a provision of the local code that was created, or whether it was based upon 1959 and they were alleging that there was some concrete conflict of interest related to financial issue. I don't know enough about it to give a specific opinion, but here's what I think would probably happen is, anybody could come to a public meeting and during public comments say, hey, I saw this, I'm concerned about it. Can you look into it? And somebody would probably ask the municipal attorney, me, for a legal opinion as to whether 1959 applies. And if there was a hypothetical scenario where there was evidence that there was a potential violation, there are also civil and criminal penalties that can apply to some of these provisions in 1959 and other portions of Chapter 19. And it could be, it could be referred. I mean, but the issue was it Brookfield, was it?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, just on the surface of it, I'm not sure how, because obviously appearing in a parade is not voting on a matter that you have a financial interest in or influencing legislation where it might be. So my guess is that was probably based upon something that was in the local
It was
code.
in their local code.
Okay, that would be my guess. And, as they'll go through that process and they'll determine whether it violated the lofty standards that they decided to adhere to as a body. And if they believe it did, my guess is it would probably be some sort of admonishment or a public reprimand, which is essentially the equivalent of don't do it again. And then the voters would decide when the person comes up for re-election. And if enough voters determine that they felt there was a problem, they could either institute the Chapter 9 under Chapter 9 of the Wisconsin statutes. They could initiate a recall or seek other redress, if they found that there was a problem.
Yes, that's my concern, is that it's clearly outlined here in their code of ethics. They have a section on sanctions, sanctioning, censuring, or removing the official. Can we remove an official? Do we have that in our code?
You don't have to have it in the code. And my guess is, I don't have it in front of me, but does it reference Chapter 17 of the Wisconsin statutes?
Not that I'm aware of. It's
Okay.
an ordinance. It also talks about a fine of not less than 100 and not more than $1,000. It clearly outlines what would happen in Brookfield.
Well, I
And-
don't, that they can't, a local municipality can't, in my opinion, pass the legislation that would give them broader powers than they have under the state statute to remove someone from office. And the specific, because we're in a,
It does say as permitted by law.
yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
that's probably, I'll give you an example now. A city is going to be different. I think, is it the city of Brookfield or is it the town?
I
of
believe it's the
Brookfield?
city, not the-
Okay. So I'll just give you an example. Under the statute that you'd want to look at for Shorewood would be 17.13, which is titled Removal of Village, Town, Town District and School District and Technical College Officers. And then sub 2 specifically relates to elective official officers. And it says, any elective village officer may be removed by majority vote of the members of the board because of physical inability to perform the duties of office or gross neglect of duty. I've looked, gross neglect of duty is not defined, but then there's also a separate provision under sub 3 where any officer can be removed for cause. And then there's a statutory process where there's a due process hearing involved in that. So whether you have local ordinances addressing this or not, the state statutes will always apply. And then of course, the other option is under Chapter 9, members of the electorate can always initiate a recall. And what we've learned, that the law's been developed, that happened at the state level not too long ago. And that you can essentially initiate a recall for almost any any reason. So if the electorate feels such, they can certainly initiate that as well.
Right, so if it's a violation at level 10, 10 being the highest, obviously that's what you would do. But if you had someone who was riding in a parade and advertising his or her business, obviously that's not a 10.
No.
It's probably a
yeah.
5. And then my point is, what do we have in the village if something like that happens? If we've got something that's between a 3 and a 7, and it's enough that,
So in other words, if I understand it correctly, the question is, if we as a body collectively believe that someone acted in a manner that was not appropriate for elected member of the village board, how would we deal with that?
yeah, is that
Um,
codified? Do we have a process in place besides the state law that has to pretty much be a 10?
No. I still think, as others have mentioned, that you could collectively as a body, you could vote to censure someone for their behavior if you had enough.
So we
enough
would just
votes.
come up with our own ideas at the
Yeah,
time?
I think what you do is say, well, this is what happened. I'd like to move to put it on a future agenda. A potential public reprimand or censure of whoever it might be. It would be discussed and you'd vote and that would be it.
And so what happened, again, in Milwaukee, it was the city attorney and a committee decided there was not.
Yeah, well, and again, I don't know all the inner details of what happened there, but my understanding was that someone had made, or many individuals had made complaints against the city attorney there. And then the question was whether or not an elected official could be disciplined or dealt with pursuant to the handbook that had been created by the HR department for employees. And the
Right,
answer to
like
that
our
was,
HR handbook does not apply to us.
no, it doesn't. Yeah.
So
and
just
that
to be
was
clear,
yeah.
I think there was a misconception earlier. The HR manual we just talked about does not apply to us.
Yeah, the rules don't, but we can still use it as a guideline, as guideposts. Like, I think the HR manual does a good job of outlining.
Now,
behavior.
there are some municipal policies that are not codified that apply to the board. The one I can think of off the top of my head is I think there's a social media guideline policy. That be one?
Within our, yes, in our communication.
So that's just as an example of an item that wouldn't specifically be in a handbook for the employees, but is a policy that's available on the village website and is something that exists.
And does that include saying, what does it say? If an elected official violates our own policy, does it say what will happen to that person?
I don't have, I can try to pull it up. I don't know.
I guess that's my
Yeah,
issue is we have no
yeah.
policy, we have no procedure, we have no.
Yeah.
We just
Sure, yeah.
default
I
to
mean,
state.
Again, yeah, there's no prohibition. You can certainly, you have the power to do that. You have the power to create standards and but again, I just want to have everybody's eyes open to understand that, they're largely aspirational and symbolic as opposed to have any real teeth, behind them. I mean, that's where,
So in that regard, it could be something like an equity, diversity and inclusion statement, or it could be a lot like the Native American statement. It's something that you recognize as important.
mhm. Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can pass a resolution saying, the village board of Shorewood wishes to embody and uphold the following principles and governing the way that we manage ourselves and the way that we conduct our business. Yeah, you can do that absolutely as well.
Sorry, I have one other question. Just, so if, there was like, kind of to Trustee Stokebrand's point, like a 5, like this parade incident. I mean, under 1959, someone could 5, if I'm 19595, if I'm looking at this correctly, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm probably not, but somebody may request an opinion, right? Which you kind of referenced earlier. So if something like that happened here, the state statute does permit, provides a process that somebody could request an advisory opinion. Does this seem like it is in conflict with state law? And if it is, it would be potentially referred to the district attorney. Is that correct?
I mean, depending on
Or the
circumstances,
correct
it
body.
certainly could, yes.
Right.
I mean, it could, yeah. I mean, if there was something criminal, it was a civil forfeiture matter. And, depending on where it occurred, I mean, if it occurred here in the well, during a meeting, I would, I might even, because I could potentially be a witness as to what happened, you might even have someone outside the organization, render the legal opinion. Might not even be me.
So like theoretically in this case, and I really appreciate this discussion, the law seems to say like with cause, we could kick somebody off the board, right? Assuming we do that, we decide we have
Well,
cause.
there's a separate process for the cause, which involves the circuit court judge coming in and overseeing a
hearing?
hearing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the other one was
Well, the other one is,
negligence of duty or something like
well,
that?
here's, I actually looked to see if I could find a case where that had ever actually occurred. So under 1713 sub 2, it says an elected village officer can be eliminated or removed by a majority vote because of either continued physical inability to perform the duties of office or gross neglect of duty. And I haven't been able to find a case defining what that is.
So
So
we would
what
say, we say, oh, this situation of this 5 rises to the level of gross neglect of duty.
Well, let me give you an example.
Aren't they going to sue it? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if somebody disappeared for 5 months and no one heard from them, and the last we heard is they had gone to Tahiti, that probably would be gross neglect of duty. But absent that, I mean, if there's a question as to where the line is, I would probably tell you to institute the for cause proceeding, which would involve a due process hearing. And it's a weird process too. What happens is the chief judge in the county where it occurs would appoint someone, but they're not technically acting as a circuit court judge when they're here. And you have to have court reporters and you have to have all this kind of stuff. And by the time you go through all that, maybe there's an election before you get to that process.
Right.
That's
I mean,
exactly what I
it
was
should be
getting at,
hard
yeah.
though to overturn the will
I
of
mean,
the
it is,
people.
right, absolutely. and
Like-
that's why
It
that
should be
is.
difficult.
Right. It shouldn't
Right.
be easy to override the people's voice.
Absolutely.
In cases like this, like the Brookfield case, it could be somebody that just wasn't thinking properly, right? And just made a mistake and didn't even know all of the rules and regulation. And there's so many rules that we have to follow. And sometimes in communities like that, people just make mistakes and I mean, it happens. So, I think there's where's that line between making that first mistake to, being thrown off a board.
All right. Oh, President McKay.
Yeah, so I won't take up a lot of time because it seems like I know where this is going. And I can just say from experience that when we did work on the social media policy, the communications policy, and we were part of a board where we had lots of things about each other that we wished the other person wouldn't do. And when it came, including social media posts and connecting with the community. And what we found is there was just a general lack of agreement about what's appropriate. It becomes very subjective and then it also becomes very political. So, and then the second, so I think you're right. I mean, we had that experience like on a board where there was a lot of disagreement. And then the other was, when I was in the time when I was not on the board, I used the ordinance, was it 151 that we no longer had? Because there were several incidents where I felt that 2 elected officials had demonstrated racist behavior. And and simply asked for the board to hold them accountable. And, that was not action that was taken under 151. And then it was rescinded after that. So that really was our mechanism to object to behavior. And that was behavior that occurred during their roles as elected officials. And it's okay with me that the board didn't take action. I felt like what I needed to do as a citizen. And I also, it was also immediately thought that I did it for political reasons, which was not the case at all. I think racism is really important, and it's some behavior that we want to hold each other accountable for. So those are just two examples about how quickly it becomes very difficult. And nobody wants to be in this situation. So, for what it's worth, I think you've stumbled upon exactly what's difficult about moving forward.
It is 6:59, so I just want to be
Okay.
conscientious of time because we have Public Works Committee scheduled from 7.
Okay. Well, then I think that, this was an item that was just up for discussion and direction. And it sounds like we don't have, a consensus on a policy. If anyone was interested in, drafting a resolution, kind of a statement of values, I'd be very open to that. So I would just throw that out there. If that's something that anyone has interest in, I'd be happy to go down that road. But then I think that kind of concludes our conversation on this last item. So does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion just a second. I just do really appreciate this discussion. I think we really covered a lot of options and a lot of scenarios. And, I think it's helpful knowing that, we have a village attorney who knows the rules. And if we get to a point where we're questioning if somebody broke the rules, we can, use you as a resource. And I appreciate that. So with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Adjourned at 7:00.
Great timing. Wow. All right. So I'd like to adjourn the Public Works Committee.
Convene.
Convene. Sorry, convene.
No, it's okay.
At
We
the-
don't go so soon.
I was trying to go fast to get it at 7. Okay, now it's 7:01. So, dang it. Yes, I do. No. 7:01 p.m. I'd like to convene the Public Works Committee. All trustees are present. We have one agenda item this evening, and that's to consider cost and funding options for bus stops on Oakland Avenue. To present this topic is Village Manager Rebecca Ewald.
Thank you. Included within your packet is some information regarding bus shelters. Initially, this item was for staff to research the expense and the funding options for covering the cost of bus stops. I'm going to start from the back of the memo first. There are very limited funding opportunities for stations that are not ADA compliant or serve that need. So I start there because Oakland Avenue poses several issues with, from a spatial constraints perspective, providing those stations unless you're going to make a decision to encroach to the sidewalk area. So the cost of a bus shelter is about 10 to 15,000 per shelter. If you were to obtain or request the county to provide a shelter and found a suitable location of which to provide one, that you were comfortable with the location, either encroaching within that public way or not, the county would place one there and maintain it. If the village elected to purchase those shelters, then we would be responsible for purchase and maintenance. So those kind of at a high level cover the funding component and then the cost component. Now I'm going to move to page 1 of the memo because this is where we get into a number of details. In here, we've provided the analysis that was conducted by Clerk Dietz. And it's a breakdown of what happens when, what are things that we need to consider when implementing a bus shelter in the existing conditions along Oakland? Generally, they're 5 to 5.5 feet of existing decorative bricks between the curb and the public sidewalk. The smallest bus shelter is 67 inches. If we assume that a 12-inch shelter is offset from the curb, the shelter would generally reduce the public sidewalk from 5 feet into 4 feet. Grade changes for shelters would have to be considered due to the proximity of ramps and the varying slopes of sidewalk to the back of curb. So, Milwaukee County Transit System also has used, we provided in your packet an example of a shelter they used at Valete and 45th. We could generally add shelters like this along Oakland. However, the appearance would have to be considered by the board because it would overhang the public sidewalk. The other standard bus shelters do not appear to be feasible, maintaining the existing public sidewalk. Additionally, bus shelters will be generally placed in front of businesses, which should also be considered by the village. And it should be noted that the shelter that is provided in it as an example that would fit in a possible space along Oakland is not ADA compliant. In conversations with MCTS, there's a limited inventory of shelters in general. Placement of those shelters is not necessarily tied to ridership. When a specific location meets criteria, MCTS provides a bubble top shelter from its inventory, and it's responsible for the maintenance and cleanup of the shelter. They do provide availability to upscale the shelter and have some advertising, and then physical space must also be adequate to provide for ADA compliance. The MCTS a couple years ago launched a bus shelter art project that uses the stock shelters and then sponsors from the community pay for the art that gets sponsored there. So that was really high level, and this item of future discussion didn't come with more description other than researching expense, funding options. And I took it a little bit further to kind of pull out some of the highlights of things that would need to be considered. From just a planning perspective, it would need to encroach into the public sidewalk, and I'm not sure what appetite there is from this group or where you would like to take this for next direction. But I know we have Director Butchlick, who is also on the line, and I may not know all of the answers to your bus shelter questions, but I can get back to you on. There's some. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or discussion.
Any trustees here with questions for Village Manager Ewald or Director Bushlick?
I have one question, and I guess this is just to anyone. Is this something that, community members have been asking for? This isn't something I've heard come up from people. I'm just curious, what the appetite is for this. I think it's great to have the information to be able to make a decision on it. But to me, I haven't heard that people are asking for this, and I have concerns about if we are going to do this, that if it's not ADA compliant, that's kind of a concern.
I think the conversation came up based off of the Oakland repavement of Oakland Avenue, when we had those kind of, after not doing the light, we said, can we do anything else with these funds? And that was something that we wanted to explore if it was feasible and the right idea for the community. So Trustee Lynn.
Yeah, I take the bus, usually about once a week or more. And it'd probably be nice to have a bus shelter once in a while, but I certainly don't feel like, just from my perspective, like I'm necessarily missing anything. The bus app, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's much better nowadays, and it tells you when the bus is going to be there. So you're less likely to spend too much time hanging around outside. And, so like in situations where it's raining or something like that, like, usually, if I've been outside a while, if I missed one and I'm waiting for the next one or something like that, usually you can find kind of an overhang or something like that. So, I mean, as much as I would like to add some, I'm cautious if it's not going to be ADA compliant, because then who are we then helping? If that's the case. In terms of the size, when I look at the bubble top shelter and the single panel side, if the glass panel faces the street, does it physically encroach on the sidewalk, or is it just that the top goes over the sidewalk? That, I guess, is my question. I don't know if anybody knows that offhand, but when the glass faces the street, I think, it fits a little better, but I don't know. I don't know how far over that goes or why that then becomes ADA non-compliant. I mean, is it worth asking?
The only example I saw provided by Clark Dietz has the rear of the shelter towards the sidewalk. I don't know if they do reverse it.
So like so a lot of times I take the bus, I'm leaving UWM. So at the corner where there's the 7-Eleven on Oakland,
Yes.
that bus shelter, the glass faces the street.
Okay.
And I don't think it encroaches onto the sidewalk over there. I think it just, it's just the bench is just covered basically.
Okay. Director Butchlick, do you know if there's, that is not a question I've explored. I'm happy to ask. But do you know the answer?
I do actually. Well, I can't speak specifically to the location on Oakland at 7-Eleven, but if you look at the photo examples in your packet, you can see that in these cases, the shelter opens to the walk, which allows it to be entered from the walk, and then you do not have, a rider does not step into the street to exit the shelter. So that's the reason for that orientation. But if you look at these examples, there is no overhang on the bubble top shelters. So that is flush, that is entirely flush on that side. So the reason for the encroachment into the sidewalk is simply that the size of their standard stock shelter exceeds the width of our right-of-way between the sidewalk and the curb.
So there's an example in the packet on page 130 of our agenda. The one on 70th and Greenfield, the glass faces the street. So you come in off the sidewalk.
Correct.
But that example in there is a 2-panel side. They also have these 1-panel sides. Although I don't know if I've ever seen a 1-paneled side one. But I'm wondering if the bar on that comes down into the sidewalk as well. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty.
Yeah. So
pretty
if you look
specific.
at, if you look at the technical drawing that was also included in your memo,
Yeah.
I think you'll note that example, that illustration is a 1-panel. And in that case,
Mhm.
that portion does overhang, but you see here, you have a width of 5 feet 7 inches. In most cases, that is going to be greater than the width of the right of way that we have available.
Yeah, the total on the top, it goes over.
Correct.
Over the sidewalk.
Correct.
And
Yep.
I'd be okay with it going over the sidewalk, but I wouldn't want it blocking the sidewalk. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
I believe I understand your point.
Yeah. I know it's a little bit in the weeds here,
But we can certainly verify that style, the single panel that has the specification drawing in your packet is available. None
Yeah,
of
that's
the photo
listed on
examples
127.
that were provided to us showed that particular option.
Yeah, I think page 127 of our agenda shows like the drawings of that option with the glass facing the street. And you know what, I think it actually does still go into the sidewalk a little bit. But it looks like that's if they leave 2 feet from the curb to the glass. Which I mean, do they need to leave that much to the? I don't know.
Typically, that would be preferred. I think in no instance would we want anything less than 18 inches.
Okay.
Trustee Lynn, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, could we ask about this option specifically? And maybe it's something where I just need to, email them myself independently to get a little more research. But this option that's on page 127 of our packet, showing like the North 45th Street option, the glass faces the street. They have 24 inches from the curb to the glass. If that was shrunken down to 18 inches, would that keep the sidewalk right of way totally clear, but also provide space for a bench and a wheelchair? And if that's the case, I'd be willing to look at locations for that specific shelter as an opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to circle back. There was a question earlier about to Village Manager Ewald or Director Bushlick about the community asking for this. Do we know what the response has been from the community about this particular issue? Have you ever gotten an email asking for covered bus stops?
It's come up here at the board,
Mhm.
and the North Avenue design, and I believe from trustee Storkbrand and from you, trustee Ursing. Forget who seconded.
That was me.
Oh, okay.
Trustees Stoker.
In the breakdown, I'm just curious, we talk about the existing decorative bricks between the curb and the public sidewalk. Is there a reason that we should care that those bricks are there? I mean, I think we all realize it was pretty, but it's an operational disaster. And the sooner we can get rid of those bricks, the better off we'll be. But we can't afford to go in and rip them out. But so what difference does it make if we would put a bus shelter on the decorative bricks? Does it matter besides, I'm guessing it's not as stable as of a base as a concrete sidewalk.
I wouldn't characterize them as an operational disaster. They really have no operational impact whatsoever.
I was referring to the unevenness when it settles.
No, because those are set in concrete. They're not pervious. So there's very little issues with settling or heaving in the decorative pavers between the sidewalk and the curb. Typically, we attempt not to core through those pavers simply because of the damage that's done to the individual pavers and hence the overall design of those panels. So depending on how the bus stops were sited, we would likely remove those pavers and replace that with concrete in the areas under any proposed shelter.
Okay, so that's a cost that's not in here.
Correct.
And then, so we could have, so the county would provide at no cost to us this option, the handicapped one. I was confused by the part where we can have handicapped accessible ones, right? The one that you presented, I don't have the page number, but the one that
Page
Trustee Lynn was
127.
discussing.
Yeah.
So that's available to us at no cost and they would maintain it. Is that correct?
My understanding based on my conversations is that is correct if we utilize a stock shelter, if they have them available.
And so this handicapped accessible one is, if it's available, it's one that would be at no cost.
They would supply the shelter, correct, at no cost.
And so who would be responsible for the install? They would?
I believe your memo states that they would install and maintain.
And so to put to take out, if there was a decorative brick, you said the decorative brick would have to come out and be replaced with concrete.
I would believe, though I do not have verification of this, that would be a village cost.
Okay. And it looks like in a lot of these places, we already have a bench. And so it would just be a bench with shelter in some of the locations. I mean, I specifically looking at, I believe the memo had 8 locations. And I was just thinking the one on Lake Bluff where the new apartment building is going seems like an obvious, the northbound lane. Seems like an obvious, some of them look like it would accommodate them quite easily. Some it would take a little more work and some it may not work at all, or you'd have to move it a little bit. And I wasn't sure about the Kenmore. Is that the one? Where does that come with Metro Market and the change? Did we ever hear from the county about where, when we redo Oakland, where they're going to put the bus stop by? I thought that was sort of a question mark yet, where they're going to put the bus stop when they were going to change their Metro Market southbound pickup.
I am not prepared to answer questions in that detail at this moment. And I apologize, you made reference to 8 locations. I'm not.
I guess I have one other question about the drawing. I just went from the images you sent, you had all those intersections. And so I made a drawing and I showed where they were. And I came up with 8, but I could be wrong.
Sent with this packet?
Yeah,
Oh,
maybe I miscounted.
I think it's up to us as well to determine if we want 1 or 8 or,
Yeah,
Two.
is that, can we? can
We
just
only,
say-
so a lot of the places, the bench is under an overhang anyways, like at Metro Market, the bench is under an overhang. At Kensington, heading southbound, that bench is under an overhang. Those are fine. Actually, same in Kensington going northbound too. So, it's really just like, where would there be a space where there's no overhang, where the bench is totally exposed? And in that case, what's the smallest ADA compliant we could fit? I guess that would be my question.
I guess my other question was on the drawing that shows the roadway, the decorative concrete 5.5, pedestrian travelway 5 feet, and then it has 4.5. Is that the storefront? That I couldn't quite understand what the 4.5 was. Is that the end of where the building would be?
It says here on that drawing, the 4.5 space from the travelway to the right-of-way varies along the corridor, and that the area is generally concrete with benches, building overhangs, trash bins, etc.
So that's open space also, that's not a building.
Yeah, that's like
Again,
where,
as it said, it varies along the corridor, so it's not necessarily a straight line up and down the corridor. So
I think we've got a lot more space here. I think there's plenty of space to do this. Because let's be honest, whenever the sidewalks are jammed on Oakland Avenue, the street's probably closed too. It's a special event. I mean, I can't remember the last time I had to move aside to let someone walk with me on Oakland. I mean, I think there's plenty of room. Is there some legal issue with going for a short amount of space, linear feet, going to 4 feet? Is it legally, are we in any jeopardy?
I don't,
Can you repeat?
I just wonder, we say that we'd be going from 5 to 4 in a few areas, it looks like to me. Why is that? I mean, obviously it's more narrow, but is it what's the issue with going to a little bit narrower sidewalk?
You mean, would it be?
Legally, are we in any
Compliant with-
jeopardy or is there
No,
a
I don't.
code?
a lot of standards for sidewalks come from the DOT. So, would surmise that when the engineer's kind of calling out that, I mean, 5 foot's somewhat narrow. You notice it, but to your point, it's really a decision up to the board.
And I guess I'm really glad that you take the bus, but honestly, I think we're thinking about people who are not quite like you,
Right.
young, fit, healthy,
Right.
you know,
That's what that's what I mean too. Like, I don't need it for me, but
and I guess it's a good question about, public input. I wonder if, we've done, Assistant Manager Anderson has done some polls and stuff. I'd like to hear from the Senior Resource Center. I think it'd be a good thing. I wouldn't want to act until I had really sought out some input from, I guess, if you could reach people who ride the bus a lot in Shorewood, how much value would you?
Mhm. And I'd like to, talk to business owners and
For the sake of time, Trustee Kudo, I'd love to hear from him as well as any residents that would like to speak on this topic. Trustee Kudo, do you have any opinions?
Sure. Not my committee, but always happy to opine about.
We're all
bus
here.
shelters. Listen, I tend to agree with the question, the premise of the question asked earlier. I don't know who's looking for these. Never heard anyone ask about shelter. I don't think a very large population riding who are out of. Frankly, I think these county there's really no design to them at all. Glass and bubbles. There are some artistic renderings that have been shown, or some photos rather, that some local business do sponsor bus shelters. Some of the signage, just the art on the side, somewhere around what $5,000 what it would cost, and then if any of them got broken, the county would. This seems like a solution problem, and a lot of other backlog that don't. I've ridden the bus, sit on the bench, watch the app, and you're fine. So I don't know. I don't know that something dying to have for them, but I asked someone writing the book, would you like to have a shelter? They're good. I'm gonna say yes. Right. So, does it benefit the village? Could be tackling. No, but I'm not on the committee, so in my opinion.
Oh, thank you for your opinion. Anybody from the public that would like to speak on this topic? Yes, please stand up to the mic, state your name, your address, and you'll have to speak pretty close to the mic to get picked up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, actually, if you can,
Louder?
there, you gotta
Right
speak
up
right
there?
into
It's
it.
just for
Okay.
the camera to be able to pick you up and people at home to see that.
Okay,
hear
I'm
that.
Vashti Lozier, 2535 East Boulevard. I didn't come here to speak on this topic, but I did want to weigh in. With respect to Trustee Kudo, I really, I really think that bus shelters are extremely important. We're looking at age friendliness, walkability, accessibility, equity in our community. The people riding the bus are the people who do need the bus shelter. These are older folks, they're disabled folks. It makes a big difference. So I would encourage you to strongly consider bus shelters wherever. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I think from my perspective, I need to do more research. I just need to do a little
Yeah.
research. I don't want to take this off the budget or take any more time necessarily or off the agenda. But I just needed to look into this a little bit more as to where we really would want them. So
Yeah,
can
it
we
sounds like
just
there's
continue?
still a couple stakeholders that may need to weigh in. Is there a timeline for a decision as far as this project is concerned? Manager Ewald?
Director Butch, like, what would the timeline be from the design perspective? Because this would need.
I don't believe a necessary decision is imminent, but I think certainly within the quarter, maybe early second quarter, we would probably want to give some direction to the engineer.
Okay. What would be the appropriate way to move forward with this topics? I think, feasibility, design. There are some questions about, like personally, the question about like advertising, right? So if the county supplies the bus stop, do we control the advertising? Does the county control the advertising? There's all sorts of questions that I think we have. So what would be your recommendation to move forward with exploring these topics?
I would say send me your list of questions. I think first we want to start with what's feasible.
Mhm.
It's nice to ask people, but I'd hate to ask people if we, people's expectations of where things are feasible are drastically different. So we'd want to make sure that those are acceptable locations to you. And then, we could ask the question about advertising. And just bring it back.
Trustee Stokebrand?
I would have real concerns about doing anything on the sides of any shelters for security. I think the clear plexiglass, it may not be aesthetically as pleasing as somebody might want, but you do have better view to the business. And you get the light from the street lights or the daylight. And as much as I like art, I wonder, I would really want to hear from Chief Worth about the security of anything that would obscure the vision into the bus stop.
Just to comment on that, Trustee Stokebrand, the police department did request to participate in reviewing any new bus shelter location proposed for response and security measures.
Did they have any immediate reaction or recommendation?
They said they absolutely want to be included in the discussion and what these look like and where they are placed.
Okay. President McKay.
Anecdotally, I know in downtown Madison, they are introducing a new type with the bus rapid transit, I believe, a new type of bus shelter, and the businesses on State Street were really concerned about being blocked in terms of like foot traffic and things like that. So I do think I like the way it's going as far as it's definitely a stakeholder discussion.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. It's something that I personally can take back to the bid and discuss with them, and if that's appropriate. But I do think that we should, discuss it with various stakeholders. We got some questions to ask, and we can reconvene in Public Works. And you say the second quarter, early part of the second quarter?
February.
Okay. That should be a significant time. And if there's anything we can do in the meantime to get public kind of perception or public opinion, if we want to put something in in a manager's memo, a poll of some sorts, or even reach out to the local Facebook community, Facebook groups to see if they want to put something out there. Be interested to see what the community has to say. All right.
Thank you.
That's all the direction you need then, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Public Works is adjourned at 7:31.
Thanks.
Exactly 30 minutes.
Do you all need a bio break before? Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll convene. It's 10 minutes, okay?
Fine.
All right, thank you. Now with that, I will call the meeting of the village board to order at 7:41 PM. All trustees are present and accounted for. And I'd like to thank you in advance for your time, talent, and patience as we conduct the business of the village. Has this meeting been publicly noticed?
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
Thank you. Item 4, special order of business. We have one this evening for a review of the findings from the winter 2020 and spring 2022 walk audits.
Right. Hi again. Do I need my name and address again? Okay. Vashti Lozier, 2535 East Lake Bluff Boulevard. I'm the facilitator for the Shorewood Connects project, and that's an age-friendly initiative. Shorewood became the very first age-friendly community in 2017. Trustee McKay was part of that process at that time. Since then, 6 other Wisconsin communities have joined us, including Greendale, La Crosse, Madison, and most recently Wauwatosa. So being age-friendly reflects a commitment to making Shorewood a great place for older adults and people of all ages. So focuses on walkability, bikeability, intergenerational community building, housing, transportation, accessibility, dementia friendliness, diversity, and equity. Conducting these 2 walk audits was part of this process. These other age-friendly communities are doing these as well. We did one in January of 2020, a winter walk audit where we wanted to look at snow and ice purely. That was right before the pandemic, so we luckily got that in. We had about 30 people participating. We had people there from the AARP, the Milwaukee County Division on Aging, Shorewood's Elder Services Advisory Board, the Ped Bike Committee, just to name a few organizations that were represented. And we used the AARP walk audit toolkit. There's like have a guide and an assessment that we then the pandemic happened. The pandemic happened, and then we had one in spring of 2022. There were 32 participants at that one, and we had quite a few organizations represented. First of all, we jointly organized it between Shorewood Connects, the Senior Resource Center, Elder Services Advisory Board, and the Parks. So we all worked together on this one. We had Police Chief Heather Worth was there, and we had high school students and older adults and visually impaired and disabled residents all represented. And I also appreciate that Trustee Stokebrand and Trustee Kudo were there. Thank you for participating in that. We had great weather, and we had 4 groups with 4 different routes, and school was still in session, and we walked by all 4 schools during dismissal. So I'm going to pass the torch.
Good evening, Elizabeth Price, Shorewood Senior Resource Center, Director of Senior Services.
Elizabeth, you're actually going to need to talk right into the front of it.
Okay, I'm surprised.
Okay,
I
that's
am.
better. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the winter walk audit. No surprises, we have some challenges. So it was a nice opportunity because following the winter walk audit, we met with DPW and the business district. And it was really a nice opportunity to learn more about what those challenges are. So what we found in the audit was that we've got a problem with the pedestrian ramps at intersections that are filled with snow and ice throughout the winter season. And that is due to the freeze-thaw cycle and the plowing. And so it requires frequent snow removal, which is a challenge. We don't have the resources to keep up with that. And so that's something that I think is a pretty serious liability for accessibility throughout the winter season, and one that's probably our most significant challenge. We also have the accumulation of snowbanks between the street and the sidewalk, and that creates an accessibility issue for people parking on the street and accessing businesses. There is a real problem with where to put snow. I think all of us who live in the village know that we have problems on our properties, but particularly in the business district, there are few places and the businesses are required to do their own snow removal. We learned about the DPW operations. It takes about 3 to 5 days to clear the snow. Begins with plowing, and then they follow up with clearing out. And it's, of course, complicated by repeated snow events and the timing. They are not using overtime for snow removal in business district clearing part of the operation. And so if you're having a snowfall on a Friday, it could be Monday at the earliest before that. So those are some of the challenges. But the answers are, I'm not here to tell you. But I following our meeting with the bid, at that time it was Steph Salvia who was the director, and she began a practice of emailing businesses reminders and talking to them about the importance of snow removal and reminding them about creating carriage walks.
And that winter, after every snowfall, I personally business district and anecdotally from my personal experience, there was a very significant change. So I think that communication did move us a little forward on improved accessibility. I spoke with Janet Henning, the current director of the bid, and she was very receptive and responsive and intends to continue that practice. So we'll see how it goes in the future, but just wanted to let you know what we found and what we learned in our.
Hello. You're gonna have to tell me if you can or not.
We can't.
Okay. I'm Hannah Seegers, live in Shorewood. I'm a member of the Park and Public Spaces Committee, and I'm the chair of the Bike and Pedestrian Safety Sub. And I was part of 2022 Spring Walk audit. Give you a little short summary. Answer. And I think the volunteers wants to start with telling you like about some of the great things that we actually have in Shorewood. I think they found a lot of great painted crosswalks and ramps coming down. We have some flashing crosswalk lights, push to act buttons, some of the really decals on the sidewalk for walk your bike or businesses. We also have a lot of friendly crossing guards that we met on our walks. And overall, I think the volunteers found that the drivers were generally conscious about watching for pedestrians, especially some designated crossings. And moving forward to some things that we maybe can do better. One of the things that we looked at was sharing the road. And some of the volunteers found some challenges around different modes of transportation. During some of the places, like the roads and the sidewalks, because there is a lot of people. There's pedestrians, bicycles, rollers, scooters, skateboards, e-bikes. And the volunteers kind of suggest that maybe more education would be good to like learn more about sharing the road, general road safety, that you should walk your bike on the sidewalks when pedestrians are present, that you should walk your bike crosswalks, that you should be on the sidewalk over the age of 12. And also they wanted to remind us about that you need to repaint and add maybe a few more decals of the walker. When it comes to driver safety, they saw a lot of speeding in Oakland and a few like running on reds over on Capitol. And they also noticed the absence of speed limit signs, just like generally throughout the village. They had a hard time looking around. They also observed a lot of busy intersections where they kind of like where bikers, especially young bikers, so like teen bikers, were like kind of like pushed up on the sidewalks because they might have to like bike into intersections. They also noted a lot of limited visibility near some corners, especially in Oakland and Capitol and on Lake Drive, very close to walks intersection. And they also talked about adding maybe some on-street handicap parking in the business district, and walking there, they actually also bus shelter. They briefly walked along the Oak Leaf Trail, and as we all can agree with the volunteers, I think we all think that that's a wonderful asset to our community. And they observed that it was very busy when they were there, and there was a lot of bikers. They were biking very fast mostly, and it's a big would be easy to collide with pedestrians. And I think they want to bring up that the bicycle people would need to warn pedestrians before passing them. And also one good thing that might be to add to most of the entrances for bicycles would be yield signs to the bicycle path. When it comes to other sidewalks and intersections and general aesthetics throughout the village, they observed a lot of cracked, broken, and eroded sidewalks and badly painted crosswalks and the lack of crosswalk signs. And they also noted that the crosswalk that only have stripes on the roads are very hard to see and might not even by drivers, especially not from the area. Volunteers wanted to suggest that maybe adding more crosswalk signs on Lake Drive. Mm-hmm. And even throughout the other places of the village. They want us to continue surveillance and repair of the sidewalks and maybe connecting sidewalks in some areas that have discontinued sidewalks. And also remind property owners and business owners to trim hedges and shrubs and trees along the sidewalks for Lastly, around the areas of our different schools, they've noted that the crossing guards are very helpful and friendly. And in general, it felt very safe. But during dismissal, it felt like kind of dangerous, especially because a lot of people double park. There's a lot of people crossing mid-block, and there's a lot of different modes of transportation on the sidewalks, and also a lot of drivers are like backed up. And they would suggest increased awareness and education for students and families, just general people living in Shorewood overall. And some concrete suggestions, they talked about maybe a walk or sidewalk path from the SIS sidewalk up to the track and parking lot, and also to create clear signage and queuing in the area of the service driveway.
Katie now, family, and I lived in Shorewood since in 20 East Glendale. I currently serve as a member of the Elder Services Advisory Board, also as our board. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the. So the walk audit is a one-day event, but the findings of the snapshot lasting impact on our community, and particularly with this spring walk audit this year, the collaboration between the Service Advisory Board, the Parks and Public Spaces Committee, is more than it's been powerful. As an outcome of the walk audit, our committees met with Tim Kenny and other representatives of the Shorewood School District. Tim has since continued to participate in public safety meetings, and curriculum related to pedestrian bike safety was developed for use at the elementary schools and can continue to be used in future years. That was presented around the time of Back to School Day. Will, with our encouragement, hopefully continue to be presented to teachers. Additionally, both committee members from both committees participated in Back to School Day this year. The winter walk audit led to a focused effort to encourage residents and businesses to clear the walks, including collaboration with the BID and the DPW, as Elizabeth mentioned, as well as several focused social media posts within Facebook, other social media groups to address residential areas. Chief Worth participated in the most recent walk audit and has continued to demonstrate interesting findings, has brought them up with both committees, which I think is powerful, expanding that reach. And an additional outcome, again mentioned, is that pedestrian signs were installed at crossings drive. There was recently discussion of upcoming Lake Drive changes, and the walk audit was brought to the committee's attention again. So it continues to inform some of this thinking about how to improve our community. And overall, walk audit offers an opportunity to celebrate many strengths of Shorewood, walkability, pedestrian safety well, and to also think about how we can. It encourages us to take a closer look at walkability, generate accessibility, and to consider. So thank you for the opportunity to share our findings. Consider the walk audit.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for implementing that. Are there any questions from the trustee?
I just want to say thank you for your time and energy and effort. This is fantastic, and it really does take a village to identify all the strengths and weaknesses we may have. And I think we're up here and we look at things from a higher level. So it's really nice to have volunteers like yourself going out on the street level and coming back with that feedback. So thank you so much for that. Oh, thank you, Eric, for going.
I did both.
Thank you, Kathy.
February 2020, let me tell you, it was.
I did the warm one. No, I mean, I thought it was great. I mean, I've lived in Shorewood for, for never once walked thinking about anything else other than whatever mind that moment. So walking through crosswalks, paying attention to traffic and walking it with folks who were either visually impaired or seniors or had different abilities, and that was incredibly helpful. Because now I think about that. before. So what I would say is just please keep encouraging us and pushing us to participate in this. There are 5 more who were not there that day. So, yeah, let's see if we can't get to 100%.
I just want to note that I walk everywhere in Shorewood every day. So I mean, I don't need the one day to walk with a group. I walk every day.
You too, but I would definitely be happy to join the next one. And
Agreed. Agreed.
We're competitive, like, so,
I walk every day. Okay, Eric? Not just one day.
And sorry if this came up when I had to step out for a moment, but I would also say I think that the piece about the education in the schools is great. So I hope that will like really continue because, I know I am the parent to an offender probably. Like I assume that my kids don't always do everything they're supposed to, even though they're old enough to know and they should be doing the things correctly. I think that just like the repeating it over and over again to remind, especially like the teens, like stay off the sidewalk is really important.
I just have a quick question. Did Chief Worth mention at all, like, any plans to do any targeted enforcement of like crosswalks or anything like that? In the past, back when I was on the Ped Bike Safety Committee, we had worked out an agreement with, I think then Chief Nimmer, that at least twice a year, they would do targeted enforcement of the crosswalks, like not at intersections, the uncontrolled crosswalks or whatever it was. And they used to do that. And then that fell off. Did she mention anything about wanting to do that again or? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, could you please come to the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
We actually brought it up at our last meeting because we talked about the added crosswalk signs. So we talked about enforcement and how we enforce and came up with a discussion about some other things implemented in the future about enforcement.
Okay.
But she didn't talk about anything targeted, but the only thing we've talked about is like thing on Lake Drive.
Right.
But
Okay.
I can bring it up to our committee if that's. Yeah.
That'd be great. And I'll reach out to her myself too. She probably doesn't even know that we used to do it. So just wanted to ask.
Good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Stokebrand, did you want to add anything based on your experience?
No, just that the contrast was striking. Plus we had COVID in between. So they were such different experiences, but just to look at that snow reminded me a lot of that day. And it was striking to see how much there was in the business district. I had no idea until we were really looking and counting and how long it would take to cross. Someone was, timing it, and it was really insightful.
Great. So that'll continue annually? Or does it need to be funded, or what does it take to keep it going?
So it's not clear where it's moving forward. We don't
If you could
necessarily
Speak closer. Thank you.
need to do them annually, like based on the age friendly and the ARP. So I think it's something though that we should continue looking at. And I've also been doing some reading and went again to a workshop about walking in general and walking as a way to connect community. And I'm hoping, and whether it's walk with a trustee, walk with the police chief, or just, intergenerational walking, I hope we can have some events. But what that looks like, if you guys have ideas, let me know.
Oh, great. Thank you. Count me in. All right. So we'll close that item and move on to the consent agenda. Item 5. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
President McKay, before you do that, there were 2 typos that occurred on this. One was Metro Market's number
you.
to be 6893. And the Harry's Bar and Grill permit is for December, not August 2022.
So with those adjustments, with those corrections, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Moore Baldoff, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion?
I'd like to pull C as in Charlie.
Yeah. No, I was going there too.
Okay. Motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 5C. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Moving on to item 6, items removed from the consent agenda. 5C, trustee, consider appointments to the Board of Appeals. Trustee Stokebrand.
I think it's considered the menorah within the public right of way is C.
I just wondered if they paid the fee.
Oh, I have an update. I have an old.
I just wondered if they,
agenda.
do we usually approve something if they haven't paid the fee? It was kind of confusing. It looked like one sentence said they hadn't paid the fee, but then something else said the fee had been deposited. So
Director Griepentrag, could you please clarify whether the fee has been paid?
Yes, the fee has been paid. Apologies if that's missing from the memo, but the fee was paid.
okay. Then I'll move to approve item 5C.
I'll second.
Motion by trustee Stokebrand to approve, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion?
I just, so we came to the conclusion that this is something that we are going to approve of. I want to also know if there's any other plans for Atwater outside of this menorah that's going to be at the park,
It's in the right of way, so it's not in the park.
in the right of way. Can you give me a visual of? It's in between the sidewalk and the street at Atwater?
Is there a map in our?
There is right of way that runs from the street perpendicular to the lake.
Along the paths.
Is there a map in here?
Near the,
Yep.
it was on the path
Is this?
The walkway.
South of it.
I know, but is this?
where it's.
Page 171
okay.
of our,
Thank you.
Sorry.
So that's pretty much where it's been always,
Correct.
and that's considered the right of way right there,
Public right.
public right of way. So I
It's
guess,
distinguished from park
Mhm.
specifically for this type of application of the special privilege permit.
okay, well then to follow that up, are there any other plans that the village has for this? Or are we continuing what we've done in the past? By putting lights on the tree?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
unless I'm instructed otherwise.
That's all thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I think I
Or-
made
Yeah.
one.
Yep. sorry.
Oh, I
You did-
apologize.
sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? A motion carries. Thanks for that correction. Item 7, public hearings. We have none this evening. Item 8, citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard this evening? All right, hearing none. Item 9, new business. 9A, consider 2024 Phase 2 SEACSI Green Infrastructure Recommendation. This is a recommendation related to the Southeast Area Sewer Improvement Project that will begin in that Phase 2 will occur in 2024. And there is a packet. This has been a committee. Trustee Ursink, do you want to report? what
Yeah,
occurred in committee?
so this is the phase 2. We discussed many potential opportunities for bump outs with biofiltration. And I think one of the biggest focus that we discussed was a fairly large bioswell on Menlo Boulevard in that green space in between the two streets. It's a very unique sort of street with that green space. And our committee came to the conclusion, to not recommend everything due to it. I think we decided to not recommend the larger bioswale because of, after speaking to the residents, Trustee Lynn reached out to the residents in that area, and they would have rather kept that green space. It was more, I think, more beneficial for the neighborhood as green space. And also this bioswell would be going to the combined sewer system. That water is also, filtered directly by MMST. So it's only educational. And I hate to use the word superficial, but that's what comes to my mind. Sorry, Leanne, but it's not necessarily beneficial for what we'd be looking forward to do. We are moving forward with a couple bump outs with biofiltration on Downer Avenue. And but there were things that we decided not to do. So if Leanne would like to kind of fill in a little bit more of those details, by all means.
I think that was a great summary. I would just remind the board that the entire green infrastructure analysis was presented to the board as part of the combined sewer improvement project update several weeks ago. Just remind you that you recommended or kicked it back to Public Works to further evaluate and refine. And we did that over a couple of meeting dates. And that is what led to the recommendation that you have before you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
So I'll make a motion. I move that the 2024 Phase 2 Southeast Area Combined Sewer Improvements Project include green infrastructure enhancements in the form of biofiltration bump outs on the north side of the intersection of North Downer Avenue and East Menlo Boulevard, and on the south side of the intersection of North Downer Avenue and Shorewood Boulevard.
Second.
Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion? Trustee Stokebrand?
So then just to clarify, we're not doing the $360,000. That's the one that would have taken up the green space in Menlo Boulevard.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And then I was just wondering, if we do these on Downer, I don't know where we are with bike lanes and planning that. And I'm just wondering if these would in any way affect bike lanes.
They, we did discuss that, and they don't go out past the bike lane. So it's basically like taking the like a normal bump out, I'll say, and just cramming a little one in.
So we could still have a dedicated bike lane in each direction on Downer if we decide so. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just clarify that. You'll note that we have bump outs on Capitol and Oakland, and they coexist well with the existing bike lanes. So typically bike lanes and the bump outs are designed so that the bike lane can travel through the intersection. The bump out or curb extension would extend only to the outside edge of the bike lane. But I just want to be careful about the statement regarding dedicated bike lanes in each direction on Downer. As previously mentioned, we have 44 feet of right-of-way, same as Lake Drive, and 44 feet does not allow for 2 travel lanes, 2 bike lanes, and 2 parking lanes. So as mentioned in the memo, it's staff's intention to take this back to the Parks and Public Spaces Committee and review with them the recommendations in the bike and pedestrian master plan for Downer Avenue, receive input from them regarding possible configurations, bike lanes or bike accommodations or shared travel lanes, and then bring those recommendations back to the village board where you will make the final determination on the typical section for Downer Avenue.
So that'll be a separate action from this one, and action that's, if this is to be approved tonight, it will not impede that configuration discussion. Okay, thank you.
And so this would be Downer Avenue is 2024?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next item is consider ordinance 9B, consider ordinance 3049, repealing and replacing chapter 462 street festivals of the Shorewood Municipal Code and renaming it special events and residential block parties on a public way or public premises. So we have, what page of the packet is anyone there?
And
Is
that
it
starts
181?
at 183, the packet.
Okay, I have 181 for some reason.
Yeah, it starts at 181, but the actual ordinance is 183
Oh,
if needed.
okay, great. All right, so this item is coming to us from the Community and Business Relations Committee, where there was a recommendation 2-0 to approve the version that is in front of us this evening. Trustee Kudo, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not really. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, small change. You know, looking at it, we went back and forth for quite a while actually. Had a lot of good discussion, with staff. I think we all give and take. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you can move closer to your microphone. We would love to hear your voice.
Time in my life.
Let's say, can someone make note of the time that Eric Kudo was not loud enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is I have nothing to add. The file speaks for itself.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Trustee Stokebrand?
We're just going to make a motion if you're
Oh,
ready.
make a motion to approve. Mhm.
I move to approve ordinance 3039, repealing and replacing chapter 462, street festivals of the Shorewood Municipal Code and renaming it special events and residential block parties on a public way or public premises.
I would like to second, but I'd like to hold my second for, I think Arthur had a question.
I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the discussion here and what's all changed in this document. If somebody could elaborate a little bit more concisely.
You actually should second it and then we can.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Any discussion?
So the discussion and revision on this predates me, back to pre-2015. So to say that there's been lengthy discussion is putting it mildly. What I did within the purpose of this memo is really just encapsulate what this new Community and Business Relations Committee, they also reviewed all of the past correspondence that I could find from the time period of when I've been here. Essentially in this ordinance, we separate out what classifies as a special event versus a residential block party. That's important for two reasons. We've had some different documents. We had a policy governing or to administer residential block parties as opposed to, we had an ordinance that was called street festivals, not necessarily special events. The language was, albeit a bit antiquated, and I think that we've learned over the course of time some practices and things that have worked well and not so well when executing both of those documents. So it really gave an opportunity for us to say, okay, here's how we've been administering residential block parties. Here's the parameters that we've used. Do we like those parameters? Do we want to stay the same? And really so that we eliminate any extra document and keep everything within the scope of one ordinance. So people aren't referencing multiple different places and it makes it easier for the applicant. So it broke out into two sections with regards to special events. It just makes the distinguishment between the residential what's classified as a residential block party versus a special event. Calls out parameters for vendors. Within that, calls out indemnification and insurance with regards to special events, cleanup, additional vendors, the review and approval process, taking new events through JP&L, which had been a practice that we had suggested in the past versus outlining within the ordinance. Having those then come to the village board, specifies the fee for extension, calls out different things that are also applied for at the time of a special event permit, such as an extension of premise or a temporary extension of a Class B, the short-term cabaret license outlined in the village's fee schedule, as well as additional fees that would be charged on an hourly basis for village services. which is encompassed in the accompanying resolution, which is the next item in your packet. There was the recommendation to charge a flat rate per hour for those types of services, such as police. There's a police hourly rate, police overtime rate, public works hourly rate, and public works overtime rate, to include the installation and signage of barricades, mobilization, road closure, patrol, and removal of signs and barricades. No administrative costs are included within the scope of this, no review of emergency management planning operations. That's also once they're, I wasn't going to put a cart in front of the horse because I've been here in this discussion on special events for some time, but once there is agreement on what you have here, then I will be going back and revising the permit process for special events, as well as the residential block parties to be reflective of the documents which you approve, and also to provide some streamlining, hopefully online for applicants. We've also, through this process, something that will be a part of it will be a template for emergency operation planning that the applicant will be required to complete and submit back into us. I've always been really pleased and grateful for the level of communication we have with Janet at the bid, and just the sincere desire to plan well from an emergency management standpoint. If you don't know this already, we have a document that we review. We review that with the applicant. We review it through police, fire, public works, to make sure that the road closure locations, the type of closure that it is, can be as well thought out as we can be for these types of events. That becomes increasingly ever important. I'll tell you, in the last closure on Kensington with regards to the World Cup viewing, I had a resident email me and question the staging of large vehicles at the end of the road endpoint. And was that done on purpose, or is that something that we did by design? And that was absolutely done by design. So we want people to just be assured that when we do have these wonderful activities here, that we're trying to do it in the most thoughtful and caring way that we can.
And have you discussed this at all with the bid? Has the Community Business Relations discussed this with Janet at all, or got feedback from the bid on this particular topic?
Janet reviewed this draft earlier this year. At least we've had discussion about it with regards to fees. This item has been sitting since September because we haven't had available time at the standing committee to review it. So that has been there. If they'd like to offer any comments tonight, you're welcome to do that. It's been actually discussed with every bid director that I have known since being here.
Great. And then, you know, just looking through this document, I see obviously the 4th of July celebration is exempt from any of these requirements. That's event that is a village sponsored event that's put on by the Shorewood Foundation. Is that correct?
Correct. So in the past, the village would actually apply for that permit.
Mhm.
We would submit a permit to ourselves
And then I'm just curious why that one is exempt.
because we're going to be following all the same protocol that when our standard app plan for emergency operation planning, staging, we're going to go through essentially the same process, but it was viewed as a bit redundant because we're all doing it and we're the ones writing.
I look at these two topics, these two agenda items as you know, it's hard for me to vote on this until we have the conversation on the next topic. So I probably will abstain from voting on this particular ordinance until, until we can discuss the next agenda item.
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to point out on that, to your point there, that the proposed ordinance on sub E that references the fees says that it says that in addition to the application fees, additional fees may be charged on a per hour basis for village services. So I think, you can take them distinctly because it gives you the opportunity, to exercise discretion and do that. It says may, it doesn't say shall. And then in the second evaluation that you're going to do tonight under sub C, 9C, is the consideration of the resolution, which will which will change the fee schedule and include hourly rates. So if you end up not putting anything in the fee schedule, it's a moot point. So I was just going to say, try not to throw the baby out with the
I
bathwater.
appreciate that. Thank you
if
for the
will.
clarification. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
And the other thing I was going to mention is that when we had worked on this initially, is one of the main goals was to create easier use by residents and, businesses that want to put on events, because you sort of have one-stop shopping now where you've got one ordinance where you can see everything laid out. And before we had policies and then there was an ordinance and they would reference, and then it was hard to tell, do I need this permit or that permit? So part of the idea here is when I went through on this is I did a search to try to find all of the areas where there was cross references within the code. And then part of that is we kind of clean those up. So hopefully the goal is if this passes, that it'll be easier, it'll be much more user friendly for residents.
So Trustee Ursink, will you be able to take action on this item? Because
Based on Attorney Bear's recommendation or analysis, I feel a little bit more comfortable moving forward with this.
Okay. So with that, I could ask for a motion to approve. And since potentially the phrase, there could be fees associated, if somebody wanted to discuss that, this would be the time we would be able to under this item.
Under this particular item right now.
Yeah, because the wording is there is a clause in the ordinance that refers to fees. So you could express a position on that. The second item is the resolution that would actually enact a change that would be applied.
Don't we have a motion and a second on the floor?
So
So I'm
I
actually,
apologize. Second it.
I'm gonna,
Right. So let's go through with this because we already have a motion on the floor. I'm sorry. Thanks. Second time tonight. You guys got to keep an eye on me. All right. Other discussion on this item. All right. Hearing none. Any members of the public would like to speak? We have two bid representatives. If you do speak.
you're holding your powder for the second one.
Yeah. True.
whenever you choose to speak, though, if you could come up to the microphone and speak into it as if you want to speak so close to it, you're not sure what else to do.
I will, if I'm.
Okay, good.
Nathaniel DeVour, 4413 North Oakland Avenue, member of the bid board. So I'm here
Louder.
louder. I can't get it much closer.
Yeah.
I'm here just to stand for businesses in the bid. I'm sure this has been out there, but we haven't discussed it at the bid. So I do feel like I would love a chance for us to discuss it. Sounds like there's been, rich discussion maybe for years, and we haven't had much. Not that I have any problem with it. It sounds like having a simplified document and a ease of use was amazing. That sounds really what we need. The fee, is the only thing we probably are concerned about. Not as residents or block parties or anything like that, but we put on some events, both me in the bid and me as a business, and there are costs associated with that. And it sounds like some of these costs could be substantially higher for these events. Again, this is just specifically for what we're familiar with and what we have done in the past. There's a budget, and some of these numbers are a good percentage of this budget shifted onto either the bid or the businesses involved on their plate. I'm not saying that that doesn't have to be the way it is in the end. Maybe it does. It's just, maybe there's time to discuss what a compromise may be. Again, I'm not sure what these numbers are, hourly rates for police officers. I have no idea. And how much of that should be on the bid or the business trying to do the party or the village, or how much do we expect of each other? I can tell you from being on other bid boards, this is a normal conversation and it does go back and forth. They're having it right now, especially maybe with the way things are changing with dump trucks and stuff getting parked in the road and having to be moved in the middle of the night or something like that. I get it. So who's who foots that bill? And I'm worried we're just minutes away from that being settled. So I would love if there's a chance for us to discuss that somewhere.
Thank you. Trustee Moore Baldoff?
Oh, no, Janet, go ahead.
Way low here.
Mhm.
My name is Janet Henning. I'm the executive director of the Shorewood bid. I know most of you. So kind of along the lines of what Nat was saying, I had known that there was some conversation about changing those fees. I don't know if I ever had seen a draft of what the fees would be or kind of the progression of how fast that would happen. And it sounds like it has been kind of a long time coming. So fully acknowledge, I do think even from the bid perspective that there's an increase in fees to the village through DPW and the police. We've asked a lot of them over the years with these events. So I fully acknowledge that. I think any event organizer, the bid or a business should foot some of that bill and should be responsible for a portion of that. I guess I would ask again, kind of like Nat was saying, just for maybe a discussion, or if there's a way to cap those fees. In my own calculations, just from taking a look at those and looking at what I typically request of the criterium race and the feast, the bid fees could be anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 for an event. So in a year, the bid could be paying up to $10,000. And with a very minimal budget coming strictly from our fee assessment, $5,000 out of a bike race that costs $20,000, that's a 25%, increase in our fees, which is a pretty hefty cost that then ends up falling back on the businesses for sponsorships. And the businesses are already struggling still from COVID to kind of recover. The bid does have funds. That's, like I said, I do think a portion of those fees should be the bid responsibility. I think my concern is more that these, how the fees are kind of divvied out, or, is it the bid requesting one police officer and the police department saying that they, need 4? Like, how is that conversation kind of laid out? And again, kind of making sure that these fees, don't go beyond the capabilities of the organized. So just trying to have a conversation of what works out best. Is there a win-win for both parties?
Trustee Moore Baldoff?
Yeah, that kind of got to my question, which was, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. And I know a big part of this is our next item, but, is it like, we're going from, for a special event, the host would just pay the $100 permit fee to now a bare minimum of $1,600. Like, that's a very, very significant increase. And one thing I also was just, maybe I'm missing this in the packet, if somebody can tell me where it is. In the discussion on the resolution, it alludes to, oh, never mind, I see it now. Okay. I was just gonna ask about the other, what other places charge. I missed that. So never mind.
Some past discussion from this community and business relations and prior community and business relations and JP&L committees have also discussed, and one theme that has been relatively consistent in the past is that all of these different groups didn't want to make a distinguishment between bid and any other organization. So when you close for when a private business requests to close, the same fee structure has been discussed as being, people have wanted the same type of structure for everybody. That has no bearing on what the fee structure is, but I just wanted to kind of share that for some context. Unless this group wants to take a different approach.
Yeah, trustee Kudo.
It's sort of, as chair of this committee, we obviously talked quite a bit about this in committee. Went back and forth on, not only the different designations for block parties and for events and how those were different, but, really dug in deep on the fee structure. Initially, I was opposed to any fees for really anything above the $100 permit for a special event. It remains incredibly important to me that villagers, feel that they can have a block party and that it be as easy as humanly possible. But, going through the conversations, especially with staff, about the actual costs that are sort of embedded into these events. And I recognize, businesses are not throwing these events to make millions of dollars. It's just as much a service to the community as it is anything else. And I appreciate that. But there's a certain amount of cost above and beyond sort of our general operating budget when these events happen. And we just need to find a workable solution as to what those costs are. And if there's a cap we should talk about. So I guess in summation, I'm comfortable with where we are moving forward on this, but I recognize that, we can do more work. I'm happy to take this back to committee and have a conversation with the bid and go over sort of line by line what this would look like, but really just know that this was an honest attempt to sort of like Attorney Bayer said, streamline everything so that there was a one-stop shop. There wasn't any ambiguity. Like you knew what you were going to have before you got into it, but it's new. And so if we have to have, additional conversations, I don't know that we're having a ton of events in the dead of winter. So this is probably a good time to have them. I'm happy to do that, but again, I know where we are. I kind of know the whole story. I'm comfortable moving forward, but if others want to chat about this further in committee, I'm more than welcome to, or more than happy to do that as well.
So that would apply to the next item and not, well, I guess we could,
You do both.
right. It would be, you could withdraw your motion and take both back.
You could just
could,
vote on it and it could fail.
that's true. And we could also, if it passes it without taking action on the fee schedule, it just leaves it that there could be fees, but it doesn't indicate what they would be. Yes, trustee Ursing.
I just want to say that these events are incredibly important to our community. It is, from being involved with all of them for the past, 5 years, 6 years now, they are an incredible resource for our community, and not just, for our residents. It's all about talent. It's all about attraction. It's all about people, seeing Shorewood in a different light and wanting to come here and thinking it's a fun community to come to. I know our, the village board doesn't necessarily have a strong marketing firm, and they're not out there promoting why people should come to Shorewood. So they're not spending those dollars on attracting residents to our community. What the bid is doing and what we've done with these events is clearly that we've spent the time, the money, and the energy to make these events so attractive that people are like, wow, Shorewood is a cool place to be. I want to live in Shorewood. And I think the money that the village puts into it currently is a fair trade-off for that, for not being able to have to pay for the whole thing themselves, not put in the energy and the time to plan these events, which the bid does. So I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that the bid is doing for these events, and to put the entire cost on the bid for these events when it's mainly just about marketing our community could be detrimental and could have a negative effect on actually having any of these events in the future. And I would hate to see that happen. So as the motion stands, I'm going to vote no on both of these items.
Trustee Stokebrand.
I just wanted to get some information. So when you said the 1,600, was that like, did you add up the Rocktoberfest fee here, or where did you mentioned that going from?
It looked like to me that it went from just a $100 fee to a $100 fee plus the $1,200 for police and 300 for,
But that was just for Rocktoberfest, which I believe was like an 8-hour. Right, I mean, I'm just want to understand.
yeah,
so
that's what I said. I
understand
wasn't
the
sure
math.
if I had that right, but it's still, the point remains, I think, even if my numbers were not entirely accurate, that it seems like a very substantial increase. And I agree with Trustee Ursink that I don't want to put this all on businesses and folks that are trying to do the work of, making this a special place for people to want to live, to want to visit. And, I think if there's a conversation that we can have that's a little bit more robust in terms of the stakeholders that are in to make sure we get it right. I think that there's room to move.
Sorry, Ms. Henning, Director Henning had something to add. So in case it's technical in nature, I would like to.
Sorry. One more thing, just on top of kind of what you were saying with the fees and infrastructure. I don't know if this is part of the resolution or not, but I do know that for the events that I've planned, the bike race and the feast, there's also dumpster costs, there's porta potty costs. There's a lot of infrastructure costs that we also take on. I think the DPW and the police would be obviously in addition to that, but the bid does not ask DPW to provide dumpsters. We contract that out separately. We also pay an additional fee for that. But I think at the bare minimum, we're usually paying somewhere between $200 and $300 per event to the village, which I acknowledge is very low.
Thank you. All right, I see Trustee Kudo, I see Trustee Stokebrand, and I see Trustee Ursink. So I believe Trustee Stokebrand was first.
If I recall, part of the staff report included looking at other communities and their fee structure. And so I believe staff has done some research, and I believe we're in the ballpark with other communities. I don't think we're outliers here. And you know what, I appreciate the events that the bid puts on. They're wonderful. But I also wonder, so when you look at the police fee, if we're comfortable with it, do we give the event organizer the option of hiring their own security?
Yes.
Instead of using so then I'm just looking, and maybe you could, hire your own garbage pickup. I'm just looking at options here for, if you don't want to pay the rate, obviously we are locked into the rates that we have for our police officers. We can't change it for the feast or the Criterion. So we're locked into those costs. Is it possible that if the police chief was comfortable and Public Works was comfortable, that they subcontracted some of their costs out to someone else?
As the chair of that committee, I think those are definitely things we should talk about, and definite opportunities. What I want to do now, though, is remove my second to the original motion, which we haven't voted on yet, I don't believe.
No.
And then I will have a motion, assuming that there's no second to the original motion, or if you remove your original motion, I'm happy to fall by the wayside, and then would have a subsequent motion to refer this back to committee, so that we can have, again, I don't think we have anything coming up that I can think of off the top of my head that is urgent in nature as it relates to special event permits. So taking this back to committee and having a longer discussion with other members of the board and doing due diligence and having discussions with the bid and whomever else would like to show up, I'm really comfortable doing, but that would be my motion. But for right now,
I'll withdraw my motion.
Yeah,
then.
I'll remove my second. But
Okay,
then I
thank
have a
you.
motion.
Trustee Ursink?
Yeah, I just want to make one quick comment to follow up on Trustee Stokebrand. I know you guys looked at all the North Shore communities, but we're looking to be the best. We're looking to set the bar higher than any other of those other communities. And I just don't think it needs to be applicable to what Whitefish Bay does with their Pumpkin Fest or Glendale does with whatever Apple Fest they do. I think we're doing something extremely unique here, and I'd like to make sure that we keep on setting that bar as high as we possibly can.
Yeah, we did also look at fee structure for the city and other communities on the North Shore, though. I
Yeah.
generally agree with the previous direction that trustee Kudo presented, but I'm supportive of taking this back to the committee.
Yes, I mean,
Motion?
yeah, so I would move to remove these two items and send them back to the Community and Business Relations Committee for further discussion and consideration.
Involving the bid and
Other stakeholders.
Yeah, well,
All
it'll
stakeholders.
be a wide net. Don't you worry. I will cast it.
I'll second that.
all right, any discussion?
I would just like to say that I think security costs are just because of the world we live in now, they're just going to be really high. And that's, and we have to do our job to make sure that events with lots of people are safe. And so I stand by passing those costs along. And I'm willing to look and see if, if there's another option for subcontracting with someone else that our police chief is comfortable with. But because of recent events, I think that this is an important thing that we have to prioritize.
One last comment, because we have a motion on the floor.
I think everybody agree that safety is paramount in events. And I think it's something that when we create these events, we sit down and we think about long and hard. The people that we want responsible for safety in our events is our police department. And I think it's a nominal fee that the village can handle for having this type of quality event in the community.
Okay, so I'm going to close comment now and ask for a vote on this, and I will encourage trustee Ursink and other trustees who are not on the committee to make sure you attend that community business and relations.
So the next,
Can we make sure that it's not in conjunction with like Public Works?
yeah, I
or
was just gonna
JPNL?
say December 19th.
Oh, no, we're absolutely doing that.
So the bid, December 19th here. It'll be scheduled during standing committee time. There are other and additional people you would like us to contact and communicate with, please let me know.
All right.
I would
I just
also
want to make sure
anticipate-
that there's a bid meeting before that. So
That's
the
up to you guys.
Yeah, I will also share
you're
that
out-
we've
you're
also
out
had
still.
residents and other people who have been interested to follow this topic. So if it's not closed tonight, I would also anticipate perhaps some additional communication from other stakeholders that may not be present as well.
I apologize, trustee Ursink, with all due respect. We were getting into debate. We don't need to do that back and forth. This is a motion to go back to committee.
I just want the record to reflect, I'm happy to meet with the bid director or any bid members prior to that meeting or any other meeting to go over their concerns and what we've talked about here and sort of happy to do it at Nat's place anytime, even today.
Trustee Moore Baldoff.
I was just going to say, would it be possible to put this into January? I just worry that with like the holidays coming up, that might be a quick turnaround for getting people involved, but
We
Oh.
recognize that the board initially canceled that meeting and then they brought it back because of a bid opening that's happening for the CC project that's scheduled and needs to be approved on the 19th. Following that, our January meetings, our standing committee time is booked for purposes of the Public Works project on both the 3rd and the 17th. So you defer
Got
until
it.
February.
Or a special date. So could we, do we have to work that out right now? Could we leave it open to coordination between the chair and village manager?
Sure. I'll just
Okay.
look for trustee Kudo to identify whether he wants to have the meeting in December or push it until February. Want to let me know that?
Absolutely.
Okay, trustee Ursink.
I think that clarified it. I just said I was going to say if there's no immediate need for this to be settled, then, it'd be nice to be able to push it back so the bid board can have a discussion about it and then come back with a recommendation and potentially meet with trustee Kudo about this topic. So, pushing it back as far as it can be in that time span, if there's nothing pressing, would be appropriate in my mind.
I mean, just to clarify, Rebecca, when does the village staff need to have something in place if we're
The
going to
next
execute
event
this once we
season.
get into?
Yeah, so it's the same conversation that's had every year, which
Yeah.
is, hey, it'd be really great to get this done.
Right.
At least at a minimum, the ordinance, because you guys have just been working, it's just complicated
Right.
for people and it shouldn't be. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So even just passing the ordinance so that I can go back and eliminate those policies, rescind those policies from the book and start putting together a process that does function would be helpful. I
And to-
mean, I have
Yeah.
not done that before because I had no expectation that this item would ever move forward. And from an administrative, if you guys want to talk about fees, talk about fees, but I suggest that you get your ordinance in order and that it's just that into a motion that is easier for everyone to work with. Because we do have a serious responsibility here when it does come to those events. And I want to be very clear with people about what the expectation is of the applicant and what the expectation is of hearing that review. Because sometimes I don't think that people really understand, and the Rocktoberfest was a great example of what you need to have done. You need to think through some of these details. They're not hard to think through, but it sounds very easy to people to say, oh, let's just go close the road. Well, there's a lot of technical things that can happen and happen efficiently, but they're not happening efficiently now. And that's where, me, I like the boring stuff, the stuff that no one thinks, it does not need to take this much time from all of your key department head staff who have other things to do. It could be far more efficient for them. So that's, you guys can talk about whatever you like, however long
Well,
you'd
I mean,
like.
I'm just
but-
trying to get a sense. I mean, if we're already
Yes.
punting into potentially February based on calendars, realistically,
From my perspective,
Yes.
the ordinance, to get that moving in a more efficient way, that's like if I were to have a dog in this conversation, I would say that's what you should move forward. Because at least it gives me the opportunity to make those things more efficient, whereas now
time.
they're not.
Yeah.
So fees, the ordinance can be passed. You don't need to pass the fee schedule with it. You can talk about the fees. But I think that the residents applying for block parties and the people who are applying for special events, I think it's much easier to streamline these processes because you guys spend a lot of time, which is somewhat unnecessary. My perspective on it. But
I want to say, Trustee Ursing, I'm going to speak for a minute. I do want to say that I think there's no reason why we couldn't take action on the ordinance this evening. Because without taking action on the scheduled fees, nobody's saying that we shouldn't have any fees. What's at a point of consideration is what those should be. And we're trying to reconcile two different practices that have been happening over time. And I think to politicize an ordinance that's clearly in everybody's best interest, and take that administrative time away, by starting in February for next season, I don't agree with, and I think that we can move forward in a very clear manner. So I'll be voting no on the motion to take both back this evening, but I do agree that not surprisingly, the issue of fees clearly does need to be talked about. And, I appreciate the committee taking time, this new committee taking time to get this to the board. But clearly, there's not agreement on that recommendation that's coming forward. And I can also say that from being on the board all these years, I know that we've had this conversation before. It's never welcomed. And the level of service that's needed for events now is greater than it was in the past. And that is, to Trustee Stokebrand's place, that is the nature of the world that we live in. I will never approve something that I don't think is safe. And I will never go against emergency management procedures and best practices. So with that, I'm hoping that you put your hand up again, and I'd really like to stop the debate. I understand, Trustee Ursink, that this is really, you're very
I'm not
passionate.
debating anything right now.
I know. Okay.
So if we approve the ordinance now and someone applied for a special event, what would happen with the
Thank you for asking that question. It would be $100 because we'd
So if
operate
it's the
based on.
criterion.
Correct. It would still be the same. That's why, Nathan and I are sitting there and he's like, oh gosh, no one's disagreeing with the ordinance. We can all be like, make efforts to become more efficient just with the time that we have if the ordinance passes. The fee will stay at $100 until such time that the board takes action to change the fee schedule.
Conceivably, a lot of groups could come in and say,
There's
we
a
got a
sale.
window.
Yep, there's a sale on permits right now.
There has been
Oh,
forever.
I never
Yeah,
thought about that
exactly.
angle, but I was more concerned with, I mean,
Good thing.
Yeah.
Let's call the question.
A motion to call the question. Is there a second? Second. Oh, is it? No, you had a point of information.
The only thing I was going to bring up was looking at our schedule. Typically the bid would help manage shenanigans, which happens in March. We're no longer doing that. So that would be the first event that would be coming up in kind of the season of events that isn't top of mind unless somebody else comes up with a new event.
Right, but that gives a month of administrative implementation.
And then I wanted to just ask Janet when the criterion typically needs to know about their event.
we ask for that application to get submitted 60 days in advance because it takes that time to actually prep.
Okay.
So there was a point, move to call the question and there was not.
Nope.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Okay, is there a majority that would like to call the question or are there more points of clarification? Or point of inquiry?
Can somebody remind me what the question is right now? I'm sorry.
There is a motion on the table from trustee Kudo to defer both the ordinance and the fee schedule to another meeting date.
Okay, so is there a majority in support of calling the question, which would mean we close discussion and take the vote?
Sure.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's do a roll call vote on this just because we want to be clear.
The second on that.
Trustee Ursink.
Trustee Erson.
Mhm.
Okay. I just want to make sure we have it. There was a lot of discussion.
Trustee Moore Baldoff. Yes. Trustee Ursink.
Yes.
Trustee Stokbrand.
Nay.
Trustee Kudo.
Yes.
President McCaig.
No.
Trustee Arndorfer.
No.
Trustee Land.
No.
Motion failed.
I'd like to make a motion to defer the item regarding fees, resolution regarding fees back to committee, community and business relations.
Second
Can we
that.
do these things out of order?
Oh, you're right.
Oh.
I forgot. So is there, I'll withdraw. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance as presented this evening? Trustee Stokbrand.
I'll move again to pass ordinance
majority.
3049, repealing and replacing chapter 462, street festivals of the Shorewood Municipal Code and renaming it special events and residential block parties on a public way or public premises.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee Lynn. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, this will be a roll call vote.
President McCaig.
Yes.
Trustee Arndorfer.
Aye.
Trustee Stokbrand.
Aye.
Trustee Kudo.
Aye.
Trustee Land.
Aye.
Trustee Moore Baldoff. Yes. Trustee Ursink.
No.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the discussion. Moving on to item 9C. consider resolution 2022-23, including hourly rates for special event permits. Is there a motion to approve, defer?
I would like, as the chair of that committee, I would like to make a motion to defer this action, send it back to our committee for further discussion and input.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Motion carries to defer back to committee. Defer and send back to committee. 9D, explore drafting a charter ordinance that reinstates the requirements that the village president's appointment to the plan commission be subjected to village board approval. Let's see, this was a future item of consideration that went to the Judiciary Personnel and Licensing Committee. It is coming back with no recommendation, right?
There was a move to advance the matter to the full board for
Okay.
discussion.
All right, so we are being asked to, there's no motion in the packet. The village board is requesting, the village board is requested to provide staff with direction as to whether the village board desires to reinstate village board approval of plan commissioner appointments. So with this, I would like to open it up for discussion. I'd really like to kind of go around once and just see where we're at because it is getting late, and otherwise we can open it up for further discussion. Trustee Moore. Trustee Moore Baldoff, if you, as chair, would you like to kind of summarize and ask, and sort of, I invite you to suggest to the village board what you're looking for.
Sure. I think that, what we're looking for is just try to gauge whether there is support to proceed down this path. I know it's something that had come up, and there was certainly quite a bit of discussion around the issue, and my position on it and what we discussed was that, it seems like this is something that had been for a very long time the intent of the people of Shorewood to have codified. We made the change to the ordinance to clean it up to align with state statute. But I think that we should have the conversation as a board that it seemed like this is something that was important to the people of Shorewood to have that that oversight. So that's where we decided to bring it back for conversation.
All right, other members of the committee?
In the meeting, I had stated my general opposition to the idea of the executive branch making appointments and having those being approved by the legislative branch. Something we're familiar with in the Constitution, but it's something that doesn't really work in practice. That being said, the case to do it in this case is extremely reasonable. And I don't really have any issue with it one way or another.
Trustee
I agree with my the other two board members here. I feel, that as long as the president's able to make these recommendations that and make a case for that role in that position, that the village board should have the opportunity to say something about that. I feel like it's important for this small board in this community to kind of have that say, so there's not situations where people are handpicking people to put on boards, because in some situations it could work out great, but in other situations it could be detrimental to the community and the decision making within that board.
All right, Trustee Stokbrand.
I guess the thing, as I was reading through this today, the thing that occurred to me was we haven't addressed yet the first thing that happened, which was I was told, so I was appointed by one president, and obviously at the beginning of a 3-year term. So my question is, first I had to be removed, right? And so we haven't addressed, we've only talked about appointing, right? So the president can remove someone at will we're saying that, you know what I'm saying?
I think the question is whether whether the ordinance applies to trustee member commissioners, trustee appointed, or the trustee member of the plan commission, whether this procedure applies to those appointments or whether they are one-year appointments like other standing committee presidential appointments.
I think the answer to that question is in two different areas. There's chapter 155 of the village code specifically discusses the standing committees and how they are appointed and how they serve. If you give me a moment, I'm in chapter 155. I can find it here.
Standing committees. like budget and
155.9.
Finance. Public
Yeah.
Works.
So it talks there, it says it's the duty of the village president after each village election at which trustees are elected to appoint a chairman and 2 other trustees to each of the standing committees and to place a copy, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a different process there, but there's also a statutory removal process under chapter 17. I think it's 1713, which we were talking about earlier. Yeah, removal of village, town, let's see here.
Attorney Bayer, I
yeah.
think the plan commission is not a standing committee.
Well, I think the question was though,
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
it? Okay, I misinterpreted the question then. Okay, you're right. I apologize. I was looking at when you mentioned appointments of trustees, immediately my mind went there. It's late. I apologize.
It's okay. So
Um,
I asked to stay, I was asked what I wanted to do and I said I would like to keep my same assignment.
Yeah,
And I was told I would be replaced on the plan commission. Can that happen?
Well, I think depending on whether or not where it is in the term, I know we have another specific ordinance in
Because I
the
think
code.
they were 3-year terms and I was at the beginning of my term, so.
Yeah, I mean,
thought
I think that's a
was within my
separate
right
issue.
To say, you know.
Yeah,
would like to
well, 1713 talks about appointive, let's see here. Appointive officers. 1713 sub 1 says, except as provided, et cetera. Any appointive village officer may be removed by the officer or body that appointed them at pleasure. That's 1713 sub 1. So yeah, I mean, I think a new administration can come in and essentially rearrange some of the, appointments. But I don't think that's really not what's before the body tonight. I mean, I think under 6223 sub D, where it says that appointments shall be made by the mayor, but it also means village manager because it's adopted by reference. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The village president.
President, excuse me. Yeah, but it says mayor in the statute, which also references village president by incorporation under chapter 61. That it just says shall be appointed, but I think if you want to override that and make it subject to this body, I think you can do that. Just understand that there's potential consequences of that, and I think this might be why they changed the statute. Is you could end up in a situation where if you have a body that get along with the executive officer, the president could appoint a number of people and they could just keep rejecting them. This is what's happening at the state level, whereas why we got the head of the DNR that was appointed by a governor about 5-6 years ago under the other administration, and they just won't leave. So, I mean, that's kind of the unintended consequence. So I think that's probably why they changed the statute. But if you want to do this, really all this would do is change it would make appointments to the plan commission further subject to ratification by this body.
And it seems to me that also it should be up to the body to remove someone. I don't think it should be up to one person.
Well, I think the problem with that though is I think 17, 13, I don't know that I'd have to do some additional research. I doubt you can amend. I doubt you could pass a local state or a local ordinance that would contravene 17, 13, the appointive powers and removal powers of the executive there. But I mean, we could look into it, but I think that's a separate issue though.
I think I agree. I think that for, point of information or this is out of scope. So what's before us tonight is what's before us tonight. The concern around objecting to being removed could be brought up as a future item of consideration, and that could go to JP&L. And that way Attorney Bear could do that research, but it's not part of the scope of this discussion and what's in front of us this evening. So just to be clear about that. Trustee Baldoff.
I was just going to say, I thank you for that clarification because that's not what I would be in support of, is taking power away from the executive branch.
Okay, so what's before us this evening is looking for direction as to whether the village board wants the staff to draft a change of policy based on what's before us tonight. So we've heard from Trustee Kudo. Oh, yeah.
Well, just a quick clarification. If you wanted to explore that, we would then bring back a fully formed ordinance for you to consider, but that doesn't mean that it's passed if you direct us to do that tonight.
Right.
So it's just,
right.
It's just the first step that, hey, we'd like to see that
Thank you for
developed
clarifying.
whole cloth, and then we're going to vote on whether we want to do that.
Right.
later.
And
That's
it's
all. That's the
not,
only
right.
clarification.
This is not a straw poll vote of support. So it's just direction. Thank you for that clarification. Trustee Kudo.
So, I mean, I'm in support of exploring this. I mean, I think that it's right and appropriate to have checks and balances, even in a small government like this. State laws have changed. We've changed practices. If for nothing else, this is something we should probably clean up from my perspective. And so I think the next logical step, as Attorney Bear said, is just take a look at this, put something together for us as to whether it's legal, not legal, what it would look like, how it would work. And then we can make an educated vote on whether we want to change this ordinance or implement something. But right now, I see no downside to taking a look at it, as I generally support checks and balances.
Okay, so that's 4 for giving direction 4. Trustee Stokely and Trustee Arndorfer, direction for staff.
I would concur with Trustee Kudo.
Yeah, I would concur as well. The reasons outlined or the reasons I raised it as a item in the last session. I guess a question I had for Attorney Bear is a charter amendment the only way to proceed on this, or are there other options? Or
Yeah, my opinion would be yes.
okay. Or yes to
Well, that
other
would-
options?
I'm sorry. It would require a charter ordinance. That was that was your first question in my head that I had. in my
Okay,
head, so
all right, thanks.
It would require a charter.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
What kind of timeline do you need to look at this? And how long would this take?
My opinion is I think it's within your power if you want to change it to contravene the state statute. I think you can. So it would just be a matter of just tell me when you want it back in front of, if it's 2 weeks from now or, the 1st January, I can have it ready. It doesn't take that long to put together.
Are you talking about the ordinance amendment or a charter ordinance?
Charter ordinance. I mean, there's also, you have to, there's notice. Yeah, I mean, I can put it together, but if you're going to do a charter ordinance, there's also, you got to have public hearings and there's some other things that go along with that. But I mean, for me to draft it, to circulate it, that's not that hard.
Okay.
Well, point of inquiry,
Right.
I believe that the last opinion was that we could just change the ordinance back to what it was.
Correct. That's, I guess, why I'm asking. What we had,
That
you
it's
can
not a
correct me if I'm
charter.
wrong,
Yeah.
but in the committee and in the discussions, the original request was to bring it back to explore a charter ordinance. So, hyperlinked to those different components. This is something that has been talked about in the past. And so we reiterated some direction from Attorney Byer, from December of 2021. And then at the conclusion of that, it was, his opinion that upon a review of the applicable authority, his opinion is that the village may amend the existing ordinance to require board approval of the planning commission members, as opposed to going down the path of charter ordinance, which was more cumbersome for the group.
No, actually, there was actually two parts of the analysis. One is, can you legally do this at all?
Oh.
And that the first question is it a matter of statewide concern? And has the state legislature spoken? And are we absolutely prohibited from doing this? Because the fact that you can pass a charter ordinance to do something differently than state law, it doesn't give you carte blanche to do anything you want. Otherwise, there would be no state law, and every municipality would have different rules. There's a process where you have, okay, well, is this a matter of statewide concern? There's other, does it say shall or may? That has some. So I did that analysis, and I think that you could amend the ordinance and require board approval. That still would take, to go contrary to the state statute. The process to do that is actually a charter ordinance, but which is not terribly difficult to draft. It's just there's some additional hoops you have to jump through. But what I would think is maybe the first step would be to circulate it and then have a discussion about the policy and if we want to do it, and then if you want to, and then we can go ahead and then schedule the required notices and hearings and all that kind of stuff.
Trustee Kudo.
So, what I would say is for the next village board meeting, I'd like to see a draft of the ordinance. But I would like staff to please provide the roadmap for implementing this ordinance, whatever public hearings or notices need to be put forth, whatever that is, so that for the next meeting, we have a first draft of the ordinance and the process that we need to follow to appropriately vote on and implement that ordinance. I would appreciate, but that's just me.
Again, and I apologize for asking this again, but we're talking about an ordinance, not a charter.
Well, it's.
So maybe I just read it incorrectly. Maybe I was assuming this is an ordinance, but.
The statutes talk, yeah.
It's a charter.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the statutes, that's the term of art that the statutes use to, there's just an additional process. I did this recently in Brown Deer, and I'm familiar with the statutory process. It's not terribly difficult. It's just, there's a couple of notices you have to make and things like that. So it's still technically an ordinance, but it's called that's sort of an amendatory charter ordinance, if you will. It's just, all it is jumping through a couple extra hoops.
Okay, so it's different than the ordinance amendment that was made under President Rozak for the Planning Commission.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
It was different.
Yeah, so what we did under the last administration is we just amended an existing ordinance to comply with state statute. So when did we do that? But so that did not require, because we weren't going contrary to what it says in the state statute.
Okay.
That's the difference.
I just
So
wanna
we
be
were,
clear.
yeah, we were harmonizing with the state statute when we did this. So there was no need. It was just a normal, regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill ordinance. This one's a little different because we're contravening what it says in the state statute. That make sense? Okay.
Trustee Ursink.
Yeah, and I'd also like some clarification on trustees appointed by the president versus plan commissioners, residents appointed to the commission, because there's a 3-year term, assuming there's a 3-year term with residents that are appointed to the plan commission. But what is the definition of a trustee that is appointed to that commission?
If it is for a 3-year term,
Is it for a
regardless
3-year
of their
term? Can
status
the
as elected
president
official.
recommend a new appointee every term? So that I'd love some clarification on that because yeah, I think that would be very helpful in this decision-making process.
And I'm also going to ask for, in the event that this is passed, if there is any retro action. Because when it was, when Trustee Kudo challenged my appointment to Trustee Backhorst, which led to this issue, part of that was that the idea was that Trustee Backhorst should not be in that seat, that Trustee Stokebrand should be in that seat. I will be abstaining from all these votes since I am at the center of all this.
I would just say, just as a matter for the record, I don't think you're at the center. I think that the chair is at the center.
Yeah, it just happened to be brought up at a very political time with me being new to the position. So just the circumstances. So for me, it feels political. And so I will be abstaining. So to staff, do you have the direction? Okay.
And
All
I'm
right.
clear on the ordinance. So we're all. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes new business. Moving on to reports of village officials, village president, update on North Shore Fire Department meeting. We did vote on moving forward with the borrowing for Station 82. So I think in Glendale. So I think that will be coming to us on the 19th for those supportive resolutions. I added another item, update on the Urban Alliance meeting with the League of Municipalities last week. I was unable to attend. Mayor Kennedy was able to attend, and he gave an update at the North Shore Fire Department Board about possible legislation. We are all hoping that there will be legislation in the next session regarding local finance reform. And he did have some information from the league staff that related to basically probably having something in legislation move forward or introduced next session, but that it would probably be tying shared revenue with consolidation. And so I wanted him to share that information. Nothing's in writing. There's nothing drafted. This is all just talks, but since we had an item of consolidation come up, there's also an issue at the county level with the 911 dispatch shared revenue. It's something that I just want to stay informed on. And that also I had talked to Mayor Kennedy about possibly hosting a joint board meeting of the 7 North Shore municipalities and just having a training on consolidation in general with the level of turnover with the amount of turnover on all of our boards and councils in the North Shore. Very few of us were around when the North Shore Fire Department consolidated and the Health Department and 911. And so, and if you're not a chief elected, you don't have exposure to those consolidated boards and how they function. And so I think that given the widespread nature of consolidation, and I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion legislatively in our state moving forward, I think it would be good for us to all get trained on it so that we're all dealing with the same knowledge. So that's something that I had asked him to join our meeting, but he must have had trouble getting on or something. So we'll leave it at that. And then I also wanted to say that I was at the tree lighting on Saturday and was very happy to be able to introduce County Executive David Crowley and our newly elected Assemblyman Darren Madison, and Executive Crowley led us in the countdown to lighting the tree. And it was just a really nice moment to basically remind us that we are all working together It was a great crowd and a really great event. So and his daughters were adorable. All right, that's all I have. Other trustees? Trustee Kudo.
I just want to say thank you to Three Lions or the Bid or whatever group put on the World Cup.
Three Lions.
Just Three Lions by themselves. Well done, Three Lions. It was a fantastic event. The weather really could not have been better. I was able to wear shorts November, which is always wonderful outside, and early December. No, it was just a really great event. There were tons of members of the community. Standing room only by far. Sorry, Arthur, I had a nice seat.
I was trying to find my way over to you. Sit on your
But
lap.
they did a really nice job, and it felt very safe. And there were folks from Whitefish Bay from other communities that walked over, and it was just a really good time. It was great press. So some local news stations were there to take account of the festivities. So just wanted to say thank you to them and everyone for coming out and having a nice, safe party in the middle of the street in late December. And any part that staff had to do with all of it.
Yeah, so I was there too, if you don't mind me piggybacking.
I didn't
on-
even see it. There's that many.
Well, I mean, it was
there.
pretty tough, right? We're like, we stayed for the first half. But because my daughter was supposed to meet like her U10 team down there. And
Sure.
of course you couldn't find anyone, but it was amazing to see. One of the things that I think really impressed me the most is that I ran into like, I was kind of streaming through the crowd, trying to find some people, and ran into Captain Robleski, who has done much larger scale, like emergency management planning. And of course, like when I approach an event, my eyes are always in different, I'm thinking about other things, but what I was really impressed with is you can see like there was officer presence, but it was in a very subdued, collaborative way. And I remember, when I first approached the event thinking to myself, oh my gosh, there are this many people, right? So I'm like, kind of like thinking through, not that I think about negative things, but I'm like, wow, right? And to see how they operated through that event was impressive to me. And you could just tell it had a different feel. And so I was so proud. I was proud with how it felt to be a spectator. I was proud to like see the care and concern that kind of came with it, and also the comments that came back. But it was one of those times when, it was amazing, right? It really truly felt amazing. You really did feel a true sense of community. That being said, we did get some complaints. So you'll see a letter coming back from me to Three Lions requesting that they provide some notification to the adjacent neighborhoods for the following, the closure coming up. It was so impressive, right? I mean, I remember coming home before coming to the event and thinking, which neighbor is having this massive party, right? And it was cool, but it was not cool for those who did not know what was happening and had invited people over for lunch on Friday. For some, holiday gathering and things of that nature. So I think one of the process improvements I'd love to see made within the permit scope is to really, for the applicant to vamp up their communication efforts. Because man, I want to see that happen again. It was really just an amazing opportunity and presence for our community.
I stayed with the crowd a little bit, but I did do a lot of shopping that day to make the businesses happy who are upset about.
Now I was going to piggyback off that. I think it was a benefit to our community, but it was also a benefit to our business community. I think Collectivo, Scout, Olson House, all these places had lines out the door, so it was a fantastic day all around and fantastic experience as a resident here in Shorewood. So yeah, I agree. Thank you to Three Lions. I've got one other thing.
Yeah.
So I just want to take this time to say that I'd like to publicly announce my intention to run for re-election to the village board coming up in April.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Other announcements, Trustee Stokebrand.
I would like to thank the bid for the tree lighting ceremony. Also, it was really nice. I didn't see the menorah. Did the menorah get lit?
I didn't see it either.
'Cause maybe that's,
It's probably going to be the menorah that's going to be at Atwater. It's typically that menorah. So,
Oh, okay. I was wondering the same.
yeah.
or maybe they were going to wait till Hanukkah. I don't know. Anyway.
Right, that was just, yeah. Mhm. All right. Any other reports of trustees? Oh, trustee Kudo.
I just want to say thank you to staff for putting together the new candidate meet and greet earlier today. We were able to sit in the basement of Village Center and go over all the lovely things that you have to do to be a candidate for office and answer some questions and provided some behind the scenes on how the sausage is made here at the village and the school board, and everyone loved it. So thank you for putting that together. I was forced to do it remotely during COVID.
Oh, that's right. You
So
were.
this
remote.
was
Okay.
this was my first in person, but I'm not on the ballot, so it was a lot easier. So thank you
Yeah.
for doing that. I look forward to doing it in the future for other folks as well.
Thank you for attending, for those of you who did attended, because it doesn't work if you're not there. We
Very
did
informative.
coordinate, but it doesn't work unless you guys show up. So thank you.
All right. Village manager?
Feel as if I've spoken enough for this evening, so no report.
Are you sure?
Yep, positive.
Okay. All right, future items for consideration? All right, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion by trustee Kudo, seconded by trustee Ursink. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now adjourned at 9:29. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. For what? Just now.
Stays that way till December 26th.
He ran in this past. Abby.
I clearly interpreted, that's why I was like.
I know.
I was like, wait a second.
If you. Sorry first.
So the whole time you've been saying ordinance, you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, we the ordinance.
He said he said he plans on knocking on every door in Shorewood.
Broken
Thank you.
into yesterday while I was at church.